There we go. We are live. We see you now, so you're good.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I'm going to drop off. Yeah. Well, I'll be listening, but I'll drop off.
Okay. Okay. So welcome, folks, to our workshop. This is to hear and discuss Lewiston High School's proposal for awarding credits and graduation requirements for the class of 2020. And I am not going to waste much time. I'm going to, will I be turning it right over to Principal Langlis, Superintendent Finn? Yep. Okay. Jake, you're up.
Can you see and hear me now? Okay. So good evening, everyone. Jake Langlis, Principal, Lewiston High School. As you can imagine, I, as well as many stakeholders and those invested in Lewiston High School, our minds are racing. So I've tried to be cohesive, and I will answer any questions you may have. But I think that what we have to remember is, above all else, we will weigh the factors of reality, and we will do what is right. We won't punish kids through this process, but these are certainly unprecedented times. We have many factors to consider: language learner programming, English credit structure. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we have newcomers come in, and their ability to achieve English credits the first year or two while they're at Lewiston High School can be limited to certain factors, and I want to be mindful of those. Special education individualized learning plans are certainly being impacted, and we are working through those. We are a half-year, full-year credit-based school. I'll talk more about that a little bit later, but that puts a limitation on us to issue full-year credits or cutting them back to half-year, and how that has implications. Our current policy requires 24 credits for graduation. There's many things to consider that are not so much policy, but makeups, fixes, improved scores, and ramping up. This is that time of year where things really ramp up for students at all grade levels. Spring break, we usually have Mud Week, and while we're working away from that structure, it was still in place for this year. We're also considering that many standards are assessed multiple times a year, especially in those year-long classes. And I put it on here because I think it's important, that procrastination factor. I don't think we want to make policy recommendations or for you all to make policy decisions based on that, but I think it is a piece of information. The stage of development our kids are in, the reality that they will procrastinate and then they will turn it on when they need to, is just part of kids' lives. And we try to coach it out of them, and we want them to do better. But I think we're all guilty as charged, and it's something that we need to consider. Should we not return, kids will lose that ability or that time frame to execute the things that all year they know they could, but that time has been kind of snagged by COVID-19. Teacher relationships and supports. I'm in full support of the superintendent and the school committee's decision to kind of put pause on things, because if we can't do it well, I don't think we should do it, especially if we're excluding kids from an equity standpoint. But that teacher relationship and the support, so that the teaching and learning component, our teachers are professionals at keeping the ball rolling. And without that interaction in a face-to-face classroom-like environment, certainly there are challenges. There's also 3 more reporting windows on paper. So we have progress reports that just came out for Q3 before we took the break. We would have had Q3 end of quarter reporting. We would have had Q4 progress reports, and we would have had a significant push for all classes for end of year Q4. Those benchmarks that help feed into that fixes, improved scores, extra time after school, teacher relationships, procrastination factors, I think are all factors we need to consider as we discuss this. So our current graduation policy is 24 credits. Of these, 15 and a half must be from the following list. And I highlighted some of these, and I'll explain that. I highlighted them because if we consider a reduction in requirements, these are the areas that I would be considering. English language arts currently requires 4 credits. One of the questions we have around that right now is whether or not we can roll that down to 3. I'll talk more about that. Mathematics currently is 3. We'd be looking at reducing all of these things that are highlighted. Social studies 3, science 3, visual performing arts 1, health half a credit, and PE 1 credit. I highlighted PE not because we're looking for less, but in the proposal or the language I was looking at, I put health and physical education together, called it wellness with 1 credit. Modification or time required. So graduation criteria as it exists, Lewiston Public Schools policy manual will not work this year due to COVID-19 life disruption. Our ability to meet the needs of students while growing from a distance capacity, we're not ready to continue teaching and learning without coming together. And we're growing that capacity. It doesn't exist, at least as of March 13th, or 16th, when we broke. Each day that passes is a time we cannot responsibly get back. Modification of the graduation requirements for the class of 2020 is allowable. The state of Maine Department of Education has shared a criteria for 11 credits to graduate. And I do have an email into the Department of Education to ask about specific content area questions. I've been in communication with local principals to collaborate on thinking and share different themes that we're all thinking of. But if you go back in time from things like proficiency-based learning, which I think we all have some regrets around as a community, our schools issue credits differently, but modification seems to make the most sense logistically, and I'm hearing that from colleagues in the area. For conversation purposes, I've structured the slideshow to answer these 3 key questions. And again, I want to remind everyone, especially listening in the audience, these 3 questions, the conversation today is really about seniors. So what will my transcript say? How do I graduate? And will graduation happen? I didn't list everything in the slideshow, but please note that we're mapping contingencies for, and the things buzzing around in my mind constantly, AP courses, AP assessment prep, AP test, SATs, spring measures, makeup work, bridge program, dual articulation, college courses taught by LHS staff, which is different than college courses that students are just taking outside of school, grade point averages, credit requirements, courses paid for by families, NCAA requirements for students who move on to the next level, Lewiston Academy Alternative Education Next Step Program, many other items. And to be honest, I really miss our Big Blue family, our Blue Devil family. It's hard not to be in the building and have all that energy. I'm sure everybody else is missing it too. So what will my transcript say? In this proposal, at least conversation starter, the idea is that have teachers calculate final scores for year-long classes. And we looked at 3 ways of doing this. One way is to use the end of year or the Y1 calculation generated by the teacher gradebook. This already exists in teachers' gradebooks. This is something that students can see when they do their own lookup of their own grades. It'll show you the different quarters, the mid-year, and then also the Y1 score, which is the calculation for the year. So that's one way. Another way is to go back to the semester grade and say, this is what the student was doing, and this is the grade that was achieved to that point. A third way is that a teacher can issue a numerical grade using student evidence provided. So this would allow you to walk from that semester point up into March, where we took a break, and say, this is the work that I've gotten from the student. This is what I know the student is capable of. And using their professional judgment and evidence, they would look for ways to issue a score that makes the most sense to them. And I put a little star here that teachers would use common sense exemptions and the greater of the 3 scores so that students are not penalized. Common sense exemptions would be family went on vacation that first week of March, and there's a lot of zeros in it because of that. We would exempt those types of things, and I'm sure there are many others people could think of, sickness and others. Credit would be issued as year-long for year-long courses with passing grades. And I put that line in there as a note that some things that some schools are looking at doing is pass-fail. I have some reservations about that. I'm not saying they're wrong, I just have some reservations. But semester 2 courses that are half year would not be issued scores or credit due to the school closure. Courses that began, second semester began on January 27th. Between snow days and February break, I don't believe it would be responsible educationally to issue credits for those. I don't think students have had enough time to give teachers the evidence they would need to issue credit. I don't think teachers have had enough time You start a new semester, it's a semester-long course. You go over the syllabus, you build relationships. So you lose a lot of classes just starting out. So for continuity purposes and what I think would be a lack of evidence, especially for seniors, the semester 2 half-year courses would not be issued scores or credit. So how do I graduate? Well, this is where I talk about the changes that we have mentioned. So the minimum achievement of 18 total credits with a minimum of the following content-specific credits earned. And this is where those reductions show up. 2 math, 2 social studies, 2 science, 3 English, 1 visual performing arts credit, 1 wellness PE credit. The students would have many more credits than the criteria there. So if we do the quick math on that, that's 11 prescribed credits. So it would leave you an additional 7 that you would have earned in other areas. Some of those other areas would be electives. Some of them might be that 4th English, the 3rd science, the 3rd math, and what have you. But if we I want to say prorate, that's not the right term, but if we adjust our scoring for the year, we would reduce the number of credits because of the limitations put upon students because of our time away. This would be a modification for graduation requirements that recognizes the work stoppage due to school closure in response to COVID-19. And again, I'm inquiring further with the Department of Education, more specifically around the English class. The question that I have asked is around our English language learner students. And this is not all students, and we ran some numbers and we reviewed transcripts in advance of this meeting. But the number of students who have 2 or 3 English credits, there's a good chunk of students who don't have as many English credits as others because of the programming that we do, which is recognized and we're improving. But the program that we do to immerse students in English, it puts them at an interesting position as they learn the language to also be expected to earn grade level English credits. And so because of that challenge to earn grade level credit, I've inquired with the Department of Education to see if that recommendation for credit is hard in stone from their point. If there's room for flexibility there, I would encourage it. Will graduation happen? The determination for graduation of events obviously have yet to be made. Criteria for those decisions will include, and I know this is a big question right now, I receive a lot of email about it. Are there current or predicted advisories or orders to not gather? Certainly if there are, we're going to follow that so that we're safe and that we're following those expectations. Is it a public safety risk to have the event as scheduled? What are other options to postpone if we move the date out? Are there other ways to do graduation or activities that mitigate public health risk? And I know we have some ideas. Todd and I were actually talking over the weekend about what if we did it outside and we used the football field and we moved a stage to one end so we could create space that way. Students could have some space on the field. We could space people out in the stands. We even talked about seeing if we could have a bunch of, and I'm not trying to make a joke of the situation because it isn't funny, but can we do blue masks that had the Lewiston logo on it so that kids would have it as maybe part of their graduation regardless. So we're looking at different options if conditions don't improve. And then also are there other items we have to consider? Makeup plan. So what do we do with those kids who that criteria gets established by you all, our school committee? What do we do with students who didn't make it? And I'm not naive that we would have had many students not be able to make it regardless. But we'll always have kids on that bubble. And we have a lot of supports in place at Lewiston High School for those students. And I want to make sure that we continue to do that. So what I would ask or approach would be to continue already in place supports where applicable. Things like standard support relationships that are already established. Some students are partially or nearly done Plato courses. We want them to be able to complete those and not have to start new. Those kinds of things. Work as assigned by teachers, various programs or others as appropriate. You know, if you're that student that you landed just below and a teacher just says, I just need that one more piece of evidence from you. And I would be comfortable saying that you're ready for the next step in life and you've earned that credit, then I want to provide you that opportunity. And then also a newly assigned option. this would be in the various tools that we already have, I would say, including Edgenuity. There's a time frame for that. I put this as time and support sensitive. We don't have everything we need in place for that. But I think if we start having a conversation about this type of plan, we can start to mobilize. And I want to add that it's hard to ensure what a student knows and is able to do from a distance model. I'm not saying this just to support the decision. I've said this from day one, and it's been a concern of teachers that I've talked to about distance learning. How do you know the student's doing the work? How do you know the student really knows this concept? There's so much value to that interpersonal connection in teaching and learning. You can't just supplement it or replace it, I should say, with a login. I do like the blended learning model. I think we could support kids, still maintain some of that connectivity, but provide it from a distance perspective, again, with adult support. And it would require, when appropriate, to roll out and support teaching and learning. This would require a rollout. So I guess what I'm saying by that is this isn't just an email that says, hey, this is your plan. We'd want to get school counselors involved. We want teachers to continue to communicate with kids. We're going to have to map out what each kid would need, each student would need, and then figure out how to make sure that they know that that's their plan and that there's a time frame. We have a lot of people just waiting to help, so that's a good thing. So my thoughts, I have some if, and if type things that run through my mind. But if LHS is open on May 4th, it gives us 8 days of instruction. And so from a perspective of if May 1st is the last day of this situation and it's lifted, May 4th would be the Monday that we would return to school. And I say it gives 8 days of instruction because I look at, if we have that, I would be asking Todd, Superintendent Finn, for his permission to do 2 days of workshop with teachers. I don't think you can shut down a thing like the high school. It's too big of a machine and then just start it back up and decide that it's a go. I also think there'll be complications from staff who can't be there or choose not to, students who can't be there or choose not to. So there's a lot of implications there. And we don't know the answers to the future, but I say 8 days of instructions because if you take out those 2 workshop days to get people back on track, you modify the 3rd day so that students can develop the routine and figure out what our plan is and then start getting into it. There's about 16 days of instruction left before seniors would be done school, before they start their marching practice and what have you. And if you divide that in half for blue days and white days, it's 8 days. My second if we have a responsible cutoff date and a responsible criteria that has been modified for the class of 2020, we can begin a support process for students who have not met the criteria. And in my mind, this could operate in collaboration with a potential return to school for underclassmen. If we do not return to school this spring, students who fall short of the requirements established would begin their respective work when approved. One example might be over the summer. And I still need further teacher and administrators team input on these ideas, as well as IT, because as we roll these types of things out, they have implications in the grade book and dates that are set, things of that nature. I'm shifting a little, but I'm still focused on the seniors. Upon determination of the 3 key decisions below, will we return to school this spring? Can we systematically provide opportunities to recover semester 2 half-year courses? And that would be not from a distance learning perspective necessarily, but as a, can we absorb that over the next couple of years with students as it is? And of course, number 3, do we modify graduation requirements as a whole? I think there's 2 different conversations to be had. One is what do we do this spring about seniors? And then 2 is what do we do about everybody else? Not knowing the answer to these 3 questions, and I don't think anybody's holding back. We don't have the information we need to make those decisions per se. There's no way to know what those decisions will be. It'd be my recommendation to review the graduation requirements to reflect the vision of what our community wants of our schools before shifting requirements for a cohort of students due to COVID-19. I bring that up because I know there's been discussions in public session about should we look at our graduation requirements again? If we were to do that, I'd want to do that before we make changes to, okay, if you're a junior, this is what it looks like for you. If you're a sophomore, because of the timeframes. If we do not return, we would not be able to issue credit due to insufficient opportunity for evidence, especially in those semester-based classes. And I'm open for questions. And I can return to any topics that you'd like.
Thank you, Jake. Hang on a second. I'm gonna get everybody back.
I don't know if I
Jake,
should stop.
how many? What's that?
I don't know if you want me to stop sharing or leave it up in case I need to go back.
If I would prefer if you stop sharing it, then I can see everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. How many seniors do we have, Jake?
The transcripts that I ran, 380.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Langlis, Ms. Ray?
Thank you. So in terms of the 380 folks, how many have reached the new requirements for 18 credits?
So we did some rough calculations, and this required me to create a PDF of the entire senior class transcripts and go through them one at a time. And so with multiple criteria, the numbers varied by about 15 students, give or take, in whole. But we landed around roughly 240 is about the median of the yes, they would make that cutoff. And in looking at some comparative data from years past, that's not terribly off from years past. I'm not pleased with the number, but it's not an anomaly.
And how many are usually deferred to the August graduation date?
August graduation has varied in size from a half a dozen to almost 20 recently.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just going to go across the screen. Ms. Whitlow?
Hi, Jake. Thank you. I had a question about the 11 credits that DOE is lowering for the requirements to graduate. Is that the math, English, making sure that all of those are met? Because when we reduced it by 1, they equaled 11. So I'm wondering how did you guys come to 18 credits versus just sticking with 11?
A great question. So there were a couple of different places where my thoughts came from, me and the administrative team at the high school. One place is, so we have 24 credits right now as far as the standard is concerned in policy. We have 8 blocks in our routine schedule. If you were a senior and you were on pace to graduate, even for eligibility, you would enter your senior year with 16 credits. We have kids with many more credits than that, but 16 is the lowest bar. So how we got to 18 was we looked at the 24. If you took away this year, in part because of the disruption with especially the semester-based courses that are half credit, it would straight give you 16. And then we looked at what I think is the straight face test as an educator, and what we've asked kids to do over the last 3 years of schooling. We came to 18 as a bar. Some in the group felt it could be as high as 20, and some felt that we could go to 16. I'm not comfortable with 16. This is one of those spots where we went back and forth several times. I think 16 is too low. I think 24 is too high given the situation. So the request is to look at 18. But I want to go back to the first part of your question. Give me just 1 second because I'm going to go to my slideshow. Not necessarily going to put it up for you, but I want to look at it because at the end of the show, I put a list of the state of Maine criteria. And the questions that I have for state of Maine around these 11 credits are 4 years of English, social studies, history, including American history, government, civics, personal finance, 2 years or equivalent, math, 2 years, science, 2 years, and fine arts, which may include art, music, forensic drama, and other items. So that's the breakdown for State of Maine Department of Education graduation criteria. It is 11 credits, and they use language of 4 years or the equivalent in standards achievement. And the hang up for me and the reason I emailed DOE was that 4th year of English requirement. That is standard state language. And if we do anything less than that, I do think we want their input.
Are you all set, Ms. Whitlow, with that answer, or do you have a follow-up?
It made me a little bit more confused about the DOE without, I guess, looking at the slide while you were talking. I wasn't really following it, but
The big difference is the state requires 4 years or equivalent in English. And what I'm pitching is a reduction in that because of the situation.
how can we do that if DOE regulates that, or do they not?
So the reason I've asked them the question is because there's also language being pushed out right now by the Department of Education that they're willing to waive certain requirements due to the nature of things, and that we focus on the safety and well-being of our staff and our students and our communities. And I don't want to get loose with that language, but because it came from DOE, I'm curious if that also means that we could lighten the load on English requirements.
One more quick question. Do we know when DOE is going to actually give us recommendations, or are they not for lowering?
So this is more of a personal opinion type question. I don't know what DOE's intentions are, but I think they've been very mindful of the, I would say the differences amongst communities in Maine. And so I think it ultimately trickles back to local authority or local autonomy, but within the parameters. So we've got to stay on the highway. We just can't drive off the road. But I think that they'll provide the highway, but that's it. But to that end, they have been pretty responsive with questions that I've had over the last several years around high school. So I would anticipate they'll get back to me with what I've asked about English credits.
Mr. Potvin, do you have any questions? And what the heck is that behind you?
It's like a smile both ways.
So this is Fred here. So, and that's my painting that I did today. So anyways, getting to school, there's a couple things that hit me, and that is you have a list there of what you think the courses they should take. And I think one of my concerns would be what would be most impactful to the student going on to college. And I think that 4th year of English is something that, you know, I think they need to achieve. And I think maybe one more science or math in that area. I'm personally okay with less than 18 credits, simply because I'm not comfortable with putting our students at a disadvantage. I think this is going to be such a chaotic situation that I think, you know, yeah, okay, we should shoot high, but I would hate to put them at a disadvantage and a lot of extra pressure which we really even haven't figured it out yet. And so those are the two comments I would have, is that I would be okay with less than 18 and to focus on the English and the math science. That would be most impactful going on to college, so that they don't miss out something there.
Yep, go ahead, Jake.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly, Mr. Potvin. I was able to kind of tease out some trending. Okay, this is anecdotal, but it's fact-based. So some of the trending that I saw when I looked through transcripts, our students, and I think many of them can go to college. I actually one of those people I believe all students go to college. Just the time frame has to be a variable. But a lot of our students who are college bound in the near term, they have upwards of 21, 22, 23 credits on the books as of mid-year this year. So it's just another piece of.
But it isn't just credits, right, Mr. Langlis? It's what those credits are sometimes. So if a student is, let's say, the history credit, and this was the time when they were taking it, and is that a full semester?
Yeah, so one thing we often run into that's challenging for kids, especially on the bubble, is government, which is given in their senior year, and there's reasons behind that in and around age and your ability to vote and your right to vote. It's also a graduation requirement in our local policy And there are components of it in the state language. It doesn't have to be full year per se from the state. But yes, students are taking that class right now to graduate.
So would that be waived? Like, would that be an exception because of the timing of that class?
So if we looked at that, the criteria, and I didn't get into what specifically, but I said in social studies, we'd be requiring 2 credits. So students who didn't make that threshold, but had 2 other social studies related credits, given the situation, and this would not be a push that I would make in typical circumstances.
Right.
If we were talking about how to change graduation requirements, I would not be looking to reduce these items in this way. This is because of COVID-19.
Mr. Potvin, are you all set for now?
All good. Yeah.
Okay. Then Mr. Donovan, and nice waterfall picture today, local waterfall.
Great Falls.
Yep, Great Falls. I appreciate Ron's questions, all the other questions that came before me. I am also just concerned about the nuances between the 11 credits that are required, the 18 that we're having. I'd be interested to see if there'd be any benefit to further, like how many students would we be able to, how many would it affect by further lowering that 18 if we could, and if that's a good idea in the first place. Those are my comments that I have.
Again, I think those are excellent points. The 11 established by the state is really, again, it's the highway. It's a bumper system. It's if that's the absolute minimum, and if everybody's staying on the highway, that's what it looks like. It just varies so much in other places. You know, for example, Poland's using an entirely different system, and they're looking at reducing certain things, I think, in their proposal, but they speak a whole different language as it relates to how to graduate high school. And that's why the state uses that language of or equivalent to. But I would argue, I guess, a bit that our students, when they walked into Lewiston High School and they got their orientation when they were freshmen in high school, they received what graduation required. They received all that information. While I don't want to penalize kids, I don't want to enable a windfall of kids going out into society unprepared because of the disruption. So I'm trying to find that thin line between the two.
That's very fair, and thank you. That helps a lot.
Mr. Damon?
Since some classes that you have, Jake, are one semester or half year and some are full year, is there any opportunity for some of the kids that are on the borderline to get half a credit for something that they were working toward a full credit, but get a half? Can they be awarded a half a credit?
So if I hear your question right, are there kids who are in full year courses that could earn a half a credit from the course because of where we're at in time? So currently, and I'll emphasize currently, we don't issue half year credits at Lewiston High School. It's not part of our program of studies, and it's for 4 year classes. I mean, there are some schools that do. For example, I think schools in our local area, if you take English 11 and you pass the first half of the year, you can receive a half a credit. If you fail the second half of the year, you still get your first half of the year credit. We went away from that years ago. I'm actually in support of it. There's a lot of good foundational purposes behind it. But currently we don't issue half year credits for full year items. I'll also say that that might be a good conversation to have a little further down the road if we're going to talk about graduation requirements. The hesitation I would have right now because of COVID-19 is the part of the year that's been interrupted will be the part that we can't recover because of timing. And so if a kid was passing at the semester with this proposal, I would want teachers to use their best thinking with that criteria to issue a score and issue the credit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know that as long as, I was thinking if you had students that met the 11 that the state was asking for and ended up with only, say, 4.5 or 5 others, could they gain a couple of extra credits to get to your 18 by going with half credits?
I understand. I'm certainly willing to give that a look, and if we want to make that part of this criteria, it could benefit a handful of kids for sure.
Do you think there'd be very many kids that would be helped by that?
I think it would depend on their support plan. My mind quickly goes to students who are already doing some level of standards recovery. And so let's say, from a different hypothetical, let's say we ran with 18 and that made sense. And a student, we ran our sheet, grades came in, and a student had 17.5 credits. And they failed, say, English 10. Could they do a half a year? Or have they already done half a year of makeup in standard support for that old class that they're fixing? That would be, I think, a place where that conversation could come in. It would require, again, one individualized analysis of each student, but we're going to have to do that anyway if we modify this.
Okay, so just something to think about.
I would agree. Mr. Damon makes a good point. I'm doing that for some of our high school diploma students in adult ed. But I would think that there's a lot of subjectivity in some of the proposed language. Whereas if there were some sort of matrix to work kids through, so if you're going to do half credits, do half credits, not, well, that kid could pass if we give him a half credit kind of thing. So keeping that kind of stuff in mind. But I do like the half credit. I don't know, I'm kind of tossing between that and then giving a full credit for a full semester class if the teacher feels that they're ready. I guess I would also want some sort of process or matrix that worked through, and not just, well, I think this kid would do all right, kind of. That puts a lot on the teacher and pressure on the student to not know, sort of like rubrics. They know what the expectations are. So just throwing that out there. Ms. Parks?
Hi. I have a couple of questions, but some of them, depending on the answer to my first one, some of them I might not have anymore. On your slide, Jake, I think it was the second slide, the courses that are the second term courses are not going to be passed. Could you explain that a little bit more? I think I missed what you were saying about that.
Yeah, so courses that began January 27th that only go half year. So this would be more electives, some of the arts, PE type classes. The reason that we pulled back from some of the requirements so specifically in those areas would be if you really look at the makeup of the course and what time elapsed from start of course on the 27th, introductions, syllabi, this is how this class runs, get your logins, that kind of stuff. And then you sprinkle in the snow days, the February break, and then the unexpected stoppage. For a semester-long class, I find it hard to think that students would have been able to provide enough evidence yet to be issued credit for the course. So that was my hesitation. I just don't think enough time has elapsed in the course yet. And remember, students meet every other day. So you get that 27th of January, plus the disruptions, plus the March 13th, last day of school, every other day. So you don't see that teacher every day.
Okay, thank you. Any of the seniors that have already earned more than the 18 credits, all of those credits will still be on their transcripts?
Yes, we would include everything.
And what kind of an impact is this having on the grade point averages and top 10 and valedictorian and all of that kind of stuff?
So top 10 and valedictorian is actually decided upon at the semester point with the grades. So that's fortunately not something that we have to look at shifting. We have, when we looked at grade point averages, this is one of the reasons why I'm opposed to pass fail. Some schools will do thing like pass is 100% and fail is 50 or 0, and it can really start to skew grades big time. It can inflate them. It can also bring some kids down pretty significantly as far as their transcript is concerned. Again, not about the top 10 and the valedictorian, but about your GPA and your standing in your class on your transcript as you move forward in life, because that's still reflected on by many people. So I hope that answers your question. I would avoid the pass-fail option from that sense. I have heard from others who are looking at pass-fail options for those semester-based courses. And I just think it's too huge of a window of time to ask a teacher to project on. You know, I know the student and I saw these things in the first handful of classes. I know that they would have been fine in June is a huge step. It's a little different from the full year courses that started end of August, early September, that went all the way into mid-March.
Mr. Majerus Collins?
Hi, thanks for all the work that that went into this proposal. I've been listening to the discussion and really struggling with, you know, I think competing interests in the sense of wanting to be fair to kids, wanting to give them the best possible future going forward, especially into a world that's likely to be really uncertain and hard for quite a while, and also wanting to be fair in the sense of having our qualifications mean as much as they can, and having a Lewiston high school diploma be a really significant thing that kids who earn one should rightly be proud of. My inclination is to be supportive of the proposal as it stands. I hope that there's an ability for there to be sufficient input from students, from parents, from teachers, to try to identify possible holes, possible unintended consequences of various aspects of the proposal. I would also say, just on the subject of pass-fail courses, that one easy way, it seems to me, to get around GPA problems is to just not count them for the purposes of GPA. You know, you could take the burden off of kids in that respect by saying we're just going to have certain classes be pass-fail and they won't impact your GPA at all. It's like they didn't happen for GPA purposes. I know that a lot of colleges have moved to pass-fail stuff for this semester, but I also understand that colleges are in a considerably different position than we are when it comes to continuing education through the end of the semester. But it's just something to think about, is that's a way that you can get out of the GPA class standing trap, is to just say, put the pass-fail stuff aside. It doesn't even count for it. Beyond that, I think it's a really tough situation, a really unprecedented situation. And like I said, I appreciate all that you've done to come up with a proposal.
Thank you.
Ms. Hawkins?
I don't have any questions per se. I just have a couple of comments. Number one, Mr. Langlis, thank you very much for the work you've done on this proposal. I like it. I like the forethought going into it. I do have some minimal concerns about the English and the science and whatnot, but I'm also aware that we do have a pretty robust adult ed program, college transitions program specifically, that helped me a lot when I was going back to college. Yes, there are some gaps there. It doesn't cover all of those subjects, but it did a lot for me when I was going back after not being in college, in school of any sort, for 11 plus years. So I know that it can help a lot of our students as long as they're aware it's there. It's also a pretty low cost program, which would get some of the hurdles out of the way for students who might be in a little bit more difficult situation. That's really all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have one question, and you mentioned it in one of your slides, and I don't know if you have an answer for it yet, but I've been looking, or I've been telling my son to look at his bridge year classes, and because those are for college credit, and
Yes.
families have kind of banked on them for various reasons, like financial, like literally, and then there's also the makes it easier for a student their first year, so there's less classes and those kinds of things. Any word on what's going on with those?
Yeah, so bridge year specifically, those courses are taught by Lewiston High School staff. So it's more that a dual articulation agreement model, and that works great. What I'm hearing from students they would like to have the chance to get going. And what I'm hearing from teachers is that they would like to support the students to get that finished up. The university system has said that they are willing to work with us on flexible timelines, things of that nature. And so with us all on pause, we're all on pause. But that is certainly one of those areas, that and a few others that I have some heightened level of concern with being in pause. I think it was the right decision for our district. I'll echo that all day long because of the other complications. But there are some things that are time sensitive: college credits, AP courses, AP assessments, things of that nature.
Thank you. Superintendent Finn?
Thank you, Jake, for that. Jake, I would advise that we unpause the bridge year classes. By all means necessary. There's a different type of investment. A lot of folks have gone out of pocket for that as well. And if there's something you can do to get that ball rolling moving forward, we have so many different moving pieces here. I've got a little bit of feedback, and I really learned a lot from the questions that the committee members have asked, and it kind of knocked a lot of mine off of there. First, Jake, I want to applaud you for thinking outside the box. Lewiston Public Schools, in particular your school that catches all of our learners, has some very unique dynamics in place. We know that education has been and always will be a very unfair game. And we also know that the playing field is not level. It's not level in America. It's not level in Maine. And so you have been challenged to do what's best for Lewiston High School. And you could have taken a very, very easy route and just jumped on board and done what everyone else is doing, but you lead from the heart and you love those kids. And so therefore, you've come to this committee with a proposal that lands us in a certain space. And so I would say that this is an educator's nightmare. It's an innovator's dream. It's an innovator's absolute dream. So I want to look at this. And if we went with the proposal that you and your team came up with, that means that as of right now, 240 kids would be good to go. And that would leave us with about 140 kids that's got some question marks and they're not quite there yet. So as an innovator, I'm looking at that saying, okay, right now we would have a 63% graduation rate, which is par for the course for the last 9 years. And that means 37% of our seniors would not graduate, or 140 students. So the first thing that I would challenge, and I know you've done this already, I believe your team has, is to create a simulation and break that 140 down into thirds. So basically 3 groups of 46 or so. And I want to know red, yellow, green. Green being these kids here with the rest of this semester could actually get over the top. That group of 46, what do we need to do, whether it be with Edgenuity, whether it be with the portfolio assessment? Now, if we can get that first third over the top, and in my experience as a principal, and you know this too, Jake, that first third's usually about one or two steps away. That would get you up to about a 75% graduation rate, which is pretty good. Now, if we can get that second third over the top to reach that plateau of 18, now you're at 87% graduation rate. I see an opportunity here. If the 240 learners have done what they need to do to qualify for, but that's still rigorous 18, and we can get 2 groups of 46 to come over the top on this, you're sitting there at the highest graduation rate the Lewiston high schools had in 20, 30 years, because you're innovative here. I would also challenge you to do this. We know that our students have got to have 4 years of English. We're asking for the 3. A lot of those learners in those 3 groups of 46 might actually be heavy in credits and areas that they're not going to need. So for example, what if they had 3 social studies or maybe even 4 social studies? Of them, how many writing or reading or ELA standards might they have met so that we can repurpose some of those credits that were extra and pull them in and say, you know what, you actually did earn an English credit, whatever that may be. So if we were to look at a really cool social studies class that, as it turns out, the child didn't even need to graduate based on this 18, were there some English components to that we could then pair up with English components to a different class to justify awarding that credit? It might be something really interesting. This is the kind of stuff I love to do, to really dig into, to say, you know, this is a 1-year deal only for this year, but can we actually justify that? I do know that as a teacher, you never got multiple choice. You had to write your hand off, because at the end of the day, you might not be the best historian, but man, you were going to write. when all was said and done. And I think you've got a lot of that going on there too. So I do like what you and your team have come up with. I would like to see a task force now formed at the district and at the high school level that can now look at these. I've got 140 kids on this watch list right now. And the challenge there is to get every one of them through. The reality is if we could get 2 groups of 46 through, the yellows and the greens through, and get the other ones pretty close, by the time we get to August, we could have a very high graduation rate. And so if we're able to take your plan, Jake, and say that the 240 learners who have met the criteria at this point in time, they're done. Now we've got personnel, we've got time and resources that can now create this task force that can get the bulk of this 140 learners over the top. And we could be sitting pretty when all said and done. But what I love about this situation, remember, it's an educator's nightmare, but it's an innovator's dream, is that we're going to learn some things because of this, because our feet were to the fire. That's going to really cause this committee and this administration to really think about, well, what the heck are we really asking for? You know, what are we asking for in terms of the educational experience for these kids? And can we start doing some cross-cutting credits? Can we start offering up a partial English credit because you did this course? And if you did 3 of those, that's actually an English credit. It really, believe it or not, it's what personalized learning is all about. And had we tackled proficiency-based the way that, man, we would have tackled it if we did this together 6 years ago, we'd be there right now. So, so all that being said, Jake, I just want to applaud you for not just going with the flow and looking at your kids and your unique dynamics that you've got and coming up with something. And I also seriously want to applaud our school committee for asking some pretty good questions in here. So Jake, now maybe perhaps you could go back to the table if that's the recommendation and maybe kind of get some answers to these questions. Let's find out about that English from DOE. And if not, can we then find out, could we come close to English with some other courses as well? People do it across the country all the time. I did it in Atlanta. And I know you could certainly do that. And then let's find out, of that 140 students who wouldn't quite make the cut, how many are close, how many are kind of close, and how many might it take till August to get done? But that's my input there. I'm excited that you got a good start going though.
So I guess Ms. Whitlow's got a question, but I guess my question with 5 minutes left here is, when would we get a fully vetted proposal to vote on? What's the time frame? So if you have one, what are you thinking, Mr. Langlis?
I can get the answers to your questions in a pretty short order. My push would be the sooner the better. And if that's a week from now, if that's days from now, if that's 10 days, the shorter the better. I think our seniors absolutely need to know. And when we talk about breaking out these subgroups, I want to get them to work.
Yeah. Okay. So no, we'll check back in. And if we have to call a meeting that's not on our schedule, we can do that. Ms. Whitlow, your question?
Yeah, so I'm hesitant of what Superintendent Finn had spoke about with expecting the seniors to continue doing the educational piece to graduate when, oh, look at the kitty, when other students are not made to continue their education. So how is that equitable?
So what I would say, it would almost be akin to if we had a summer school program, or if, let's say that this was, the cutoff date was June 1st. And so we'd technically be in our June 1st. And there were still students that needed to be able to continue working because they didn't do the work that they needed to do to get to that point. I think it would be equitable in the sense that we're giving you the opportunity. You don't have to, but we're giving you the opportunity to be able to get that work done. Because at some point in time over the last 3.25 years or 2/4 of a year, 3.5 years, something got missed along the way. So we would be providing the opportunity for folks, if they were interested, to do that additional work to earn whatever they had to earn. And it would be equitable in the standpoint that the students that don't have to do that have already made that cut. By us providing students with an alternative way, it would actually be more advantageous, because if we stuck with the traditional route, and let's just say that Jake, were to get to the end of this school year, we were back in school, we're all good to go. It's first week of June, and Jake's graduating 63% of his kids. We know that based on the data, how it tracks the past 10 years, that maybe 6 or 7 of those kids might go on to graduate in August. We have an opportunity here to put another 80 across the stage. But again, to your point, Tanya, and I completely agree with you, if the students had done what they needed to do to make that particular cut, then, you know, I could see that argument. I see this as us providing an opportunity for folks to step up as if we would during the summer.
And I think to that point, Jake had said that going into your senior year, you should already have 16 credits. So again, it seems like it had been something that was building up along the way for students who maybe were waiting to the end, procrastinating, or they just didn't get something and had to make it up in a different way. You had a follow-up, Ms. Whitlow? Go ahead.
So how will we allow the freshmen, sophomore, and juniors to have the same opportunity right now so that they're not behind when it comes time to graduate?
So I could chime in with that. Some of this is, you know, what comes first, the cart or the horse, and I'm not trying to dodge the question by any stretch. Until we know what this looks like for seniors on a piece of paper, it's hard to figure out what it's going to look like for 9th, 10th, and 11th. There are options there, and without mapping it all out right now, one option would be to modify the requirements for students by class, looking at it. One would be, and we could scale that. So juniors, you might modify because they only have a year. Sophomores, we have to look at that crossover between, we don't need to modify because they still have plenty of time within their schedule and available course offerings between now and graduation to just make it back to whole. And then the other thing I would ask, just to go back to the presentation, is this very group has mentioned that they'd like to look at graduation criteria from the 10,000 foot picture. If we're going to do that, I would almost prefer we have that conversation over time before we make a decision on 9, 10, 11, 12, as far as those things that they couldn't do this spring.
Miss Ray, and then Miss Parks. And
Thank
we
you.
have a couple minutes.
Yes, I'll try to be quick. So what Superintendent Finn was talking about the 3 categories, I completely agree with that. I did not agree with the way to get there. I think that the data should inform the strategy, not trying to get to a certain graduation rate when that might not be the reality. If there aren't 45 kids in each bucket of the red, green, and yellow lights, then we shouldn't force that. And it may come to light that, you know, more kids than 45 are closer to that finish line. And so I just wanted to encourage that we look at that data, look at how many people have 17 credits, the 16 credits. If someone's below the 16 credits, I have somewhat of a doubt that they'll make it to the 18 by the end of this process. But I'd rather have the numbers inform that moving forward than trying to get to a graduation rate that feels falsified to me.
To Ms. Ray's point, I just want to clarify, I was just using that as an example. Certainly was not anything more than just an example. So the buckets obviously wouldn't be equal. We hopefully would be kind of heavy in that first bucket. Some kids are a lot closer. But from a graduation rate standpoint, it's a number, it tells a story, but that could be a potential outcome. It's certainly not the goal. The goal is to get every learner every opportunity we possibly can give them. So I want to just make sure that I'm being very, very clear. Never have I ever been numbers driven. I'm very evidence driven. But when I use that example, I was just using it as just that, just an example.
Ms. Parks, and then we got to wrap up.
Jake, really quickly, do you have any kind of a plan in place yet for AP testing?
We do actually, kind of behind the scenes. Todd and I have had a conversation about that. AP testing this year is going to be a modified assessment based on the point in which in the year that we stop. So kids don't have to worry about the knowledge that they didn't have exposure to for the rest of the year. AP testing is scheduled for early May, and they're looking at modifications for that. I've worked closely with Dave Terrio, and we're going to start getting out permissions Kids who are under 18 by law have to have parent permission to have YouTube unlocked on their school devices. And so we are activating that process so that kids can access the AP supports, which are based in YouTube. So we're getting that turned on, and that should be up and running very soon.
Excellent. Oh, so super important discussion. Thank you, Principal Langlis. Thank you, Superintendent Finn, for pulling this together so quickly, but also being thoughtful. Again, of the slide that you had, all those different buckets, that's a lot to work through for each student. But it would be really great to figure out the students that are all set so you could then focus your energy on the students that you would need to get where they needed to be. So I will wait to hear from when you're ready, at least we could do it in phases if we needed to, where we take care of the seniors first and then we figure out 9, 10, 11 so that we're not rushing just so we can get the seniors done. So just know that there are options in how you want to get this timeline settled. And I'll wait to hear from you when you're ready with a proposal for a vote.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Wave your hand if you need like a 2-minute break to switch between meetings, or I'm just going to launch in. Oh, Miss Ray?
Can I just ask if the feed from the lewistonpublicschools.org site where the button for the YouTube is now connecting to this live stream?
Mr. Tech Support? Oh, Mr. Donovan sees it.
I emailed Dave about it. He said it should be working, and I did test it. It was working.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Excellent.
And Madam Chair, if you're all set with me, I'll watch online.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay. So welcome everybody to our regular business meeting of the Lewiston School Committee. I will call this meeting to order. And I would like to remind folks that I will allow public comment subject to time restrictions on the agenda items listed in the agenda. And you can send those to LPS public comments at lewistonpublicschools.org. That link is on the agenda itself. I believe it's on our website as well. And we're going to start off with a COVID-19 update from Superintendent Finn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are began phase 2 today. Yesterday being Sunday the 5th, we sent out our operations order for the second phase of our mission here. And that was sent out to all of our teachers. Our parents then all got a letter and a translated letter, I should say, and also a video to let them know what this phase looks like. At the end of phase 1, we were able to deploy 679 laptops to our middle school learners, and also our high school learners that did not already have one were able to pick theirs up. That really allowed us to focus on the elementary learners. And tomorrow is a big day because at each of our elementary schools, there'll be curbside pickup of devices. Not to my knowledge have elementary students brought technology home before, so this will be unprecedented. But again, it's an opportunity for us to really start thinking, can we do this, down the road when the time comes for us to really think about blended learning and different options for kids. So the answer to that obviously is yes, and so we'll learn a lot. Our principals worked together collaboratively with our folks from technology and from facilities in order to create the logistics required for tomorrow. I anticipate a smooth morning, afternoon, and even evening pickup time for folks that can't get there during the day. And so I'm very, very impressed with that and very encouraged by what we heard today when we debriefed very quickly. We are over 70,000 meals served already, and that will continue to grow. Our child nutrition and our maintenance efforts do not stop just because phase 1 is over with. That continues, and now we ramp it up with our Edgenuity. Right now we have our middle and high school students logging into Edgenuity if they so choose to. If not, we also have other options for them that are attached to our website. Our Office of Teaching and Learning has done a phenomenal job at keeping that site, that treasure chest, I should say, very, very well stocked for our folks, so that they don't have to worry about coming into the school and grabbing worksheets and packets. And it's the safest and really cleanest way for us to be able to provide some remote learning opportunities. Our teachers began their check-ins with students, heard back from a couple of parents already who were thrilled to hear from their teachers. We did set some guidelines that were in collaboration, as we know, based on our last meeting with the association, where our teachers will be checking in with their students at least twice a week. And so again, the feedback on that's been very positive so far. So all of our learners and parents should be having some days where the phone rings quite a bit, or some email comes through, or students are joining in on Zoom meetings. Our teachers are very well versed in Zoom. We've taken precautions to prevent the Zoom bombing. Obviously, we are taking advantage of the waiting rooms and also the passcode to get into meetings, so folks can't just jump in and out of meetings. We anticipate that our elementary students will be up and running on PathBlazer just after all of our elementary teachers go through the webinar, which is in the works here within the next couple of days. In the meantime, there's about 6 years worth of work that you could actually do right now on our website. So I'm pretty impressed with that. Our technology and our transportation offices are working on breaking down the data from a survey that was sent out, a technology survey that was sent out to our community members to find out who's got tech, who needs tech, where we need to be placing hotspots. And right now, where hotspots are kind of on back order, we are working hard to get those in place, get them on some school buses, get those out to where they need to be, and allow our students who are struggling to get onto the internet to be able to do so for free as well. Still working with Spectrum, still working with other providers that are willing to step up to the plate and help out our students and our families that are in need. And so as we strive towards equity for all, we have to be really mindful of the places where our children are in the most need. And so working hard on that as well. So I look forward to the end of the week where I hear back from our teachers and from our principals, from our kids, invited them to start sending me some homework personally about some things outside of traditional school that they've been doing in order to perform random acts of kindness, helping out their families, helping out others as well. And our folks step up. It's really important. Something else I want to really mention too is that our folks over at the Green Ladle have been delivering about 350 meals a day to veterans and to some elderly folks who can't get out of their homes, and doing so for free. A lot of local restaurateurs and folks from the Lewiston community have stepped up to help out with that effort. In fact, Mr. Langlis himself today was delivering some meals. And so that's really heartwarming to see. I'll share this. Our senior class is an absolutely amazing class. And I'll talk about this because they're going to graduate. So I'm going to talk about this, whether graduation is this summer or whenever it's going to be. But what's most impressive is we got a group of seniors that raised some money for a trip, and they brought that money down. And they said that we want to put this towards the Green Ladle and put this towards feeding those vets and feeding those folks that need some, some extra loving care. You may not have seen the story of the picture of that Lewiston graduate from the class of 46, 90 years old, and put class of 46 up in his window, and he and his wife cried when their meals were delivered. These are some of the little stories that maybe we won't ever, read about or hear about. It won't make CNN, but we're seeing selflessness right now in our learners, and we're seeing some of those skills that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have learned, or they wouldn't have had a chance to perform. I'm very impressed with our teachers and our staff for emphasizing the social and emotional skill of self-awareness, knowing what you're feeling, and then working towards, well, how do we manage that as well? And so as we try to find the silver lining in a very imperfect situation, where we are right now as we enter, now we're into our 4th week, with our steady-handed approach, with the phenomenal support that I've had from Bobby and from Karen and from their teams, we've been very, very consistent in rolling out what will be a sustainable model from which we'll be able to take several components and put into our school years in the future. So there's our update. Really excited about phase 2. Every member should have received a copy of the operations order. You got that a little bit early, but all of our teachers have that in their hands right now. And it seems that everyone's on the same page, and we're moving forward full steam ahead.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Agenda. Sorry. I have to go back and forth between screens. I apologize. Okay, so agenda item number 3. Are there any items that the members want to remove from the consent agenda? I don't see any. Looking all through. Okay. Hearing no objection, the consent. Oh, who?
It looks like Kieran was trying to get on.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't have an objection. I just was wondering if we had to take this by roll call because of the state law.
For the consent agenda? For each one to ask if they have an objection? I can do that. I don't.
I mean for the vote as a whole, even if it's a consent agenda. I mean, I'm not sure. I guess that the question's mostly for Alicia as the parliamentarian.
Yes.
I would advocate taking it as a roll call vote. And then just the one other thing, Chair Roy, might be to take the roll call votes in order as we normally would. Rather, I know it's easier just to look through the screen, but just for recording purposes.
Well, now I got to remember who's what ward.
If it's helpful, I can call the roll for you.
Okay, so we're going to vote roll call on the consent agenda. And Ward 1, well, actually, we start with Miss Parks as an at-large.
I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I'm in favor. Is that what I'm supposed to be saying? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Ward 1, Mr. Damon. See how good I do. I'm Ward 2, yes. Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4, Tanya.
I didn't think that we voted on this. If nobody opposed, we just adopted it, right? Or something, no?
I just want to get on the record that nobody has any objections or anything for the consent agenda. Okay. Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6, Mr. Pop.
Yes.
And Ward 7, Mr. Donovan.
Yes.
Thank you. Want to be as clear as possible for the notes. Oh yeah, City Council.
Yes.
Representative Ray.
Come on.
You're fine? Yes?
Yes, yes. And I thank you for doing it in the order. I just think it helps.
Absolutely.
Procedure.
Absolutely. Okie dokie. So the consent agenda is adopted. Okay, so agenda item number 4, to receive and approve the FY21 budget. I will entertain a motion on this.
So moved.
Miss Whitlow from Ward 4.
Second.
Mr. Majerus Collins from Ward 3. Any discussion? Miss Ray and then Mr. Potvin.
So I wanted to just revisit the idea or re-echo the thanks to the administration for making this preemptive move towards really prioritizing the budget that will go before the City Council and then to the voters, hopefully in May. I haven't heard anything about that, but I will ask. On the city side, we're now facing the same discussion. And I think just preempting that with your recommendations was really helpful because now I think the council is developing their own feelings of what they want to hang on to, and we don't really know what the priority is from the department heads yet. And so just the process that happened on the school side felt like the right timing and felt like the right move because we really don't know what folks' financial situation after this is going to be. And so reducing that tax burden is a priority for both the city, and I'm glad the school committee made that a priority as well.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Mr. Potvin?
So I'm not clear what exactly we're voting on here because I haven't heard back that the city council has approved what we sent forward to them in our budget workshop. Is that been okayed? Is that what we're riding with, the last numbers that were presented to us? And if that's the case, Could I have Bobby just reiterate what the impacts are onto the three pieces, how much the taxpayers are going to be paying, how much the surplus is being carried forward, and how much more we got in state revenue for just a generalized total. So I don't know where we're at right now to be able to vote.
So it's a good question. We did not receive any guidance from the city council stating that we needed to make any changes, which we normally do if they are looking for further cuts. So we're saying this is the budget as we would like to see it. And then there's a final presentation, I believe, is it next week, with the city council? And that our portion of it would be done. We're saying this is what we would like to do. And unless city council somehow comes back, then we've done what we're supposed to do. Right now, I have not heard anything to indicate that we need to do anything further. But I'd like to have Miss Avery answer your other questions, if you can, Miss Avery.
Yes, I can. So just to recap what we discussed a few weeks ago, we brought before you and the city council a reduction in the superintendent's budget of $1,423,976.74. That comes, so if we're talking revenue, we'll talk about the revenue budget first. For the board proposed budget, and that's what we're talking about tonight, the additional local allocation would be reduced by that $1.4 million. So it would be flat. There would be no increase to the additional local. So you've got what sits in the additional local is $1,329,796. That's what it is for FY20. And this FY21 proposal is the same amount. It's flat. There is no increase. There is, however, an increase on the local debt service that was allocated and authorized prior to this. So we don't have any control over that. And then the what the taxpayers of Lewiston are obligated to pay based on the ED 279, that has also increased. That's part of the funding formula. So again, we have no control over that as well. But we do have control over the additional local, which is zero. It's flat. The carry forward number is the same. It's as what we talked about before. It's $3,829,493. And so that's a high number. But that is the same. The only reduction on the revenue side is that additional local.
Okay.
All set, Mr. Potvin?
Yeah, good.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? No. Okay, and we are going to do a roll call vote. And we will start again with Ms. Parks. Yay, nay?
Yes.
Mr. Damon?
Yes.
Myself from Ward 2, yes. Mr. Majerus Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Potvin?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
And Ms. Ray from the City Council?
Yes.
That is a unanimous vote. Thank you all very much. Okay. Agenda item number 5, to receive and approve the first reading of a proposed policy change regarding sick leave due to the contraction of the COVID-19 virus. This will be presented by Chief Administrative Officer Bobby Avery.
Yes, so I'm going to start. I'm really going to go through the document that's in your packet, and I'd like to go, and I hate to do this, but I'd like to read it to make sure that we're all clear. There's a lot of information in here, and I do want to go on the record to say that There may be, and I'm glad it's a first read because there may be some things in here that I need to change, and I'll point out where one of those items is that I'm still doing some research on. So I'm going to start at the very beginning, and we're talking about compensation. And so Lewiston Public Schools will adhere to the following salary, benefit, and sick leave protocol for all eligible employees. And then we go into defining what an eligible employee is. An eligible employee is defined as someone who is working at LPS 30 days before they were impacted by COVID-19. That's one place that I'm doing further research on. I don't know if that's mandated by law or if that's just something that we can actually, we can put in there and on our own. I do want to look up statute on that. Employee compensation. The basis of this recommendation is to ensure that there is no financial hardship brought to an LPS employee due to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. So the categories are as such. 1, all regular employees will receive their contracted number of hours for compensation purposes during the school closure time period. Number 2, all stipends for co-curricular and athletics will be honored for the 2020 spring season. Number 3, all 21st century after-school assignments will be honored depending on grant funding and authorization. Number 4, all long-term subs defined as employees who were hired into a long-term sub teaching position, including teachers and ed techs, will be paid their long-term sub rates. Number 5, all building-based substitutes will be paid their regular daily rates. Number 6, all daily substitutes that have worked on a consistent 5-day per week basis for the last month will be paid their daily sub rate based on the school calendar. Workshop days, holidays, and school vacation days will not be compensated. So that ends the compensation section. Then
So
we move,
Miss Avery,
yes,
this is a big document. I wonder if we could maybe see if there's questions about those
yes,
categories before we move forward.
I think that's perfect.
I know I have one. The building-based substitute, can you explain what that means?
Yes, so building-based subs. So we allow each one of our buildings to have 2, maybe 3 building-based subs. So if you're a substitute and you're assigned, let's say, to Montello, you are assigned only to Montello. You work there every single day. There's an assignment always waiting for you. It's 5 days a week. It's throughout the entire school year. You belong just to that school. We have quite a few of those. And then, so if you think about it, we have 3 different categories of subs. We've got the long-term subs, we've got the building-based subs, then we have the daily subs. And the daily subs are somebody that will pick up an assignment here and there. And some of those do pick up an assignment every day, and they may pick up an assignment at different buildings. It doesn't have to be at the same building. It could be all of our buildings. Does that make sense?
Yes. Does anybody else have any questions about that first part, Miss Ray?
Could we just add clarification under portion 6 about all daily substitutes that have worked on a consistent 5-day per week basis for the last month? Could we define what we mean by last month? I think there might be, if there are vacation days in there or not, just how we're qualifying that would be helpful, I think.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Other questions about that first part? Mr. Potvin?
Bobby, does this include stipends that teachers take on in addition to their base job?
It does. So this proposal has to do with the spring sports and so that's extracurricular, but any co-curricular as well, because a lot of these folks have already started their prepping, their planning. So I'm recommending that we do pay just for the spring. If this extends out further, to God knows when, I'd have to come back before you. I'm only recommending spring at this point.
And these are activities, if we go back to school May 1st, will continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, so the stipend positions, it doesn't, I mean, all stipend positions for spring, it doesn't make sense that we would pay that. I mean, if they've done, maybe I guess maybe some of the high school and middle schools have done more prep work and maybe get paid for what they've done, but I don't understand paying them for everything if they're not going to be performing it. I guess that's my concern, and I don't know.
Mr. Majerus Collins?
Yeah, I guess I just want to say the exact opposite of that. I think it's great that we're paying people what they would have been paid had they been working. I think that there's a lot of folks who are experiencing financial hardship, and that our educators are already underpaid. And I think that doing anything to cut the legs out from under them is absolutely unacceptable. And so I'm really grateful that the district is committed to making sure that none of our employees experience financial hardship or loss of earnings as a result of COVID-19.
So I just want to, so we can ask clarifying questions, and I get what you both are saying, but rather than discuss each part, we'll discuss as a whole. So if there are things that you're like, I don't think I'm in favor of that, then please write that down for discussion. If you have any clarifying questions about what something is as Ms. Avery goes through, otherwise it's going to take us forever to get through. But I understand why you're asking the things that you're asking. Are there any more clarifying questions for that top piece? Mr. Damon?
Bobby, do you know how many, what the actual number of stipends is that are affected here?
I don't know that off the top of my head now.
It's quite a few though, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Finn, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just want just to clarify that point, and maybe this might help Ms. Whitlow out a little bit, was that the MPA has authorized our coaches to do virtual coaching with their kids. And I'm wondering if that might kind of change our thinking a little bit, if we know that in order to keep our folks whole, that they're doing the Zoom workouts, they're doing the check-ins, they're doing these things that I would expect them to do, and earning that, just like our teachers are. It just would be my expectation. And with the MPA giving the thumbs up that we could do that, that's something that I would certainly communicate out.
Okay. Ms. Parks?
Seeing as most of the spring season should have already started, have these people already been paid?
No, to my knowledge, they have not been paid, but I did authorize for the folks that have been working, which at the high school they have, that they should be paid. They've done the work. Now, they haven't done the whole season, but they've done all of their prepping and planning.
Do you have a date, as long as we move ahead with this, do you have a date when they can anticipate getting money that they might be waiting for?
I have the date. I just don't know it off the top of my head, but there it's scheduled. Yes.
Okay. Let's move to the second section. Oh boy.
Second section's easy. So it's about employee benefits. And I put it in here just so that it is in here, so that it's on the record. All benefits will continue to remain in effect for eligible employees. Should buildings remain closed, LPS's benefits open enrollment will continue to be held, and all employees will have the opportunity to change their benefit enrollment elections at this time. Open enrollment will be held electronically during May 1st through May 22nd. So it's just stating that, prior to COVID-19, we held our open enrollment during the same time period in May. Folks were able to pick up the phone, email, stop by and see us, fill out their forms if they had any benefit changes that they wanted to make. And we're just saying, we're going to continue that process, except it's just going to be electronic rather than seeing each other in person. Any questions over that section? Okay. So we're going to move on to the next section. It's employee sick leave expectations. There's a lot in here. I apologize. I'm going to go kind of slow. If an eligible employee meets one of the 4 qualifying events, sick leave benefits will be as follows. And the qualifying events I'll talk about after I'm done this section. 1, employee will receive 10 days of paid sick leave time that the district will provide. Employees' accrued sick leave or earned leave will not be utilized. 2, should the employee require additional sick leave, the employee will utilize their sick leave or earned leave time that they have accrued while working for LPS. 3, if an employee requires additional sick leave or earned leave time, and per the employee's collective bargaining agreement, a sick bank is available, the employee may request additional days from the appropriate sick bank. These days are not guaranteed. Once the 3 options above are exhausted and the employee requires additional sick leave time, the employee has the option to take this time off as unpaid. Any questions about that section? Ryan?
Just a question about number 1. It says employees will receive 10 days. Is it saying like we're giving out 10 days no matter what, or 10 days if they're if they fall ill to COVID-19?
Yes, they have to qualify for those 10 days, which we're going to get into those qualifying events in just a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I probably should have reversed it. I probably should have put the qualifying events first, which I can do on the next draft.
Okay.
To make it more clear.
Perfect. I have no questions until we get to that point then.
Okay. Alicia? Oh.
Is that okay?
Sorry.
Bobby's taking over.
Sorry.
Under item 3, these days are not guaranteed. Could you explain what that means?
Yes, so that's the sick bank. So the sick bank has to have days in it in order to draw from it. So if there's none there, then they won't get them. I just want to make sure that we're clear that just because a sick bank exists doesn't mean that they're going to be able to get days from it. They have to be there to get them.
Can you just remind us how employees in different units or under different contracts are informed about what the sick bank looks like over time?
Can you clarify a little bit more?
Do they receive, so when I look at my pay stub from work, I have my personal leave time is listed online there. Is that also a function of the pay stub that they know how much time is in the sick bank, or they can easily access that at any time?
They have to make a request to access that. So it's not on their advice slip. Only their personal time is on their advice slip, but they can make a request of HR and we'll give that to them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think you can go, Bobby.
Thank you. Okay. Next page. So the COVID-19 protocol will be in place until the governor of Maine or the Maine Center for Disease Control authorizes public schools to be in session per law. And then HR 6201, Families First Coronavirus Response Act, it ends December 31st, 2020, whichever occurs later. So as an example, if the governor brings us back in before December 31st, 2021, or I'm sorry, 2020, then the HR 6201 Act stays in place till December 31st, 2020. So if we come back, which I know we have to, when we come back prior to December 31st, if an employee still comes down with test positive and falls into those eligible buckets, let's say they test positive for COVID-19, they still have the right to petition whatever it is that the decision is that we make here. Does that make sense? No, okay. So let's say we come back next week. I am COVID-19 negative, but in a month from now, I test positive. Even though we're back in session and we're all going along just like nothing happened, right? We're all good. I test positive in a month from now. The law states that this is in place through December 31st, 2020. So between now and December 31st, if any employee tests positive or falls into those eligible buckets, they have the right to draw upon this sick leave.
I think everybody's good with that. I think everybody gets that part.
Okay, good. Okay,
Yep.
so the qualifying events, and this is based on HR 6201, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So the first bucket is the employee has a current diagnosis of COVID-19. The second bucket is the employee is quarantined, including self-imposed quarantine, at the instruction of a healthcare provider, employer, or government official to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The third bucket, the employee is caring for another person who has COVID-19 or who is under quarantine related to COVID-19. And the fourth bucket is the employee is caring for a child or other individual who is unable to care for themselves due to COVID-19 related to closing of their school, childcare facility, or other care program. This language is copied directly from the statute. For the time period in which all so this is now, well, are there any questions in regards to the eligible categories?
All of these have to be verified by a doctor.
No, there's nothing in statute that states that they have to be verified by a doctor.
Ms. Parks, and then Mr. Majerus Collins.
I know this comes from the law, the way it's written, but what is the employee is number two, the employee is quarantined, including self-imposed quarantine at the instruction of a healthcare provider or employer. How is it self-imposed quarantine if it's at the instruction of someone else?
So I read it separate. I read it differently than you do. I read that as being one part of the sentence, and then at the instruction of a healthcare provider or government employee. So it's like there's like multiple categories within that one sentence. That's how I interpret it.
So if somebody just says, I feel like I want to self-quarantine, whether they have a verifiable reason, then they fall into this category.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Mr. Majerus Collins?
That cleared up my question, which was access to verifying this disease is not necessarily guaranteed for everyone. And so I wanted to make sure that there was an option for folks if they weren't able to get into a hospital or something or get a test.
So like I said at the beginning, before I started this, there's still some more research that I need to do because in the original, I've written this probably 7 times. And in one of the first couple of times, I actually had a doctor's note attached to this language because I really wanted to have somebody, even if they self-quarantine, I want somebody to say, here's my doctor's note saying that I have asthma or I have COPD or, whatever type of high risk category that person falls in. I need to make sure that that falls within the law, that we actually can ask for that doctor's note. This statute doesn't have that in it, but I'd like to find out if we could.
Yeah, Mr. Majerus Collins, just a second. I think that for other types of illness where folks have to be out for a certain number of days, a doctor's note is required. I don't know why this would be any different. Mr. Majerus Collins?
I don't know if this falls into the talk later category versus clarifying questions, but I guess I would say that the last thing I want doctors doing right now is trying to write sick notes for folks. I think that we need to do everything we can to lessen the burden on the healthcare system. And if that means that a few people end up with some sick time that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise had, that does not seem like it's really that bad of an outcome.
I just wanted to make sure that we stay within policy that we already have for other things, and this would be after we were all set back. So it wouldn't be now, right? Nobody's asking for doctor's notes right now because we're not in session. This would be something down the road. It would only be a few people probably, right? Is that
That's
what you're
right.
saying? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then you have the family, which, Then you have the Family Act. I'm guessing that's from FMLA kind of language. Who the people that you can care for. Is that the last paragraph? Is that the last part?
Oh, no, you helped write that. We'll talk
Yeah, for
about
the
that.
teacher's contract, right? Mhm.
Yes. Yep, we'll talk to that in just a second.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, so number 4, the employees caring for a child or other individual who is unable to care for themselves due to closing of their school, childcare facility, or other care programs. That makes me a little bit nervous. I mean, I don't have kids who can't take care of themselves. So I don't know if childcare facilities are closed at this point. I don't even know. But it seems like pretty much anybody who has young children would fall into that category. Is that not true?
So it can be, that could be true. I can tell you that we have right now, to my knowledge, a handful of folks that are falling in this bucket right now today, that are saying, my childcare facility is closed, I have to work, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I'm like, we gotta wait until after the board meeting, so I can have this discussion with you. We actually have to make some of these decisions sooner rather than later, just because some of these folks are really, they're destitute. Some of these folks have their parents, which are the grandparents, right, watching their grandchildren, and they're saying it's too risky. We're not comfortable anymore having the children in our home, and it's heartbreaking for them. These are real problems that they're going through, and I'm not giving them an answer at the moment, because I know what I want to say, I know what I want to do, but I also know that we have to have this discussion.
So I guess I have a clarifying question on that then. We're talking about this to be after we come back. Wouldn't the CARES Act cover folks right now during the school closure and all of these kinds of things? So I don't know why you would wait for us right now.
So in this document, there's the today, and then there's the after. And we haven't gotten to the today portion. That's what we're coming up to next.
Okay.
So right now we're talking about the after, but then we have to make decisions for right now, for today. And so I'm going to talk about that in just a second.
Well, I'll let you talk about it.
Okay. All right. So for today, for the time period in which all buildings remain closed due to COVID-19, all employees, including emergency personnel, will not be expected to utilize their sick leave or earned leave time for any illness. When the governor of Maine and/or the Maine Center for Disease Control authorizes public schools to be in session, this temporary practice will become null and void. And so embedded into this, and I can break it out if you want it to be more clear, but embedded into this is all employees that are having issues with COVID-19. So with those buckets above, those 4 buckets, so if you tested positive, if you are self-quarantined, if you have childcare issues, if you're caring for somebody that as a family member, and we've got that defined down below, that is tested positive, then we wouldn't ask you to use any of your sick leave at all, and they'd continue to be paid, because we're paying everybody. Currently, we're paying everybody.
Right, but you said any illness. Why?
Yes.
Because
so,
I don't think that's what the governor's thing says.
Okay, so now we're going to move out of COVID-19 and let's talk about I'm making this up, but let's talk about somebody that might have had a heart attack and they need to go out of work, right? So that's a whole different scenario. So like maternity, we've got, you know, illnesses that are unrelated to COVID-19. So the question is, do we charge, do we take their sick time for those events unrelated to COVID-19? They are getting paid, however, they're not working in a normal capacity.
So my understanding was if somebody could be, they have to be ready and willing if you called upon them to go to work. And if they say no, then they don't get paid for that day and they can use their earned time.
I agree with that.
Okay. But you're asking us to make an exception
So
in
no,
this document.
yes. What I'm asking is, I'm recommending in this document, I'm saying during the time period only in which we're closed, we will not expect employees to use their sick leave time or their earned leave time while during the closure period.
For any reason.
For any reason.
Clarifying questions only. Does anybody have a clarifying question? No? No. Okay. And do you want to talk about the family is defined at all? You go through that? Thank you.
I do want to talk about that. So this language came from the certified professional employee contract, so our teacher's contract. In the document that I had put in the packet, you'll notice that I bolded a couple of words in there. Those are added words to this definition. They are not part of the collective bargaining agreement. They're added because we do have employees that fall in this category right now with COVID-19, where they're, like I just explained, they're watching their grandchildren because their children don't have childcare. So I'm saying the employees, so the family is defined as employee's child, stepchild, grandchild, which is added, spouse, significant other, or parent, step-parent, mother-in-law, father-in-law, those two have been added. Significant other is defined as a sole domestic partner that has lived with the employee for at least 12 months, not related by blood, not covered by any domestic partner or legal spouse relationship for the last 12 months, and who is jointly responsible for the employee's welfare as evidenced through a joint deed, joint mortgage, joint lease, joint credit card, joint bank account, and/or powers of attorney authorizing each domestic partner to act on behalf of the other. Employees may request to use leave to care for other relatives or for individuals for a family-like relationship exists upon review of the superintendent. That's all part of the collective bargaining agreement. The only thing that's been added into this definition is grandchild, mother-in-law, and father-in-law.
Okay. Any clarifying questions before I go ward by ward for discussion or comment? All right, Ms. Parks. Oh, sorry, Mr. Damon, you had a clarifying question?
Getting back to what Bobby was saying earlier, and I probably should have spoken up then, but the full-time employees, anybody that met the employee criteria in the first section of this, they're getting paid their full salary now during this entire shutdown. Is that right?
That's correct.
So regardless of who they're looking after now, they're still getting paid as if they were in school.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
So the only time that like the closed daycare might come into play would be afterwards anyway.
So we're talking about like, so let's say you're an employee of LPS and your daughter and son-in-law have children and their daycare closed and they have to work and you're asked to watch the grandkids. We do have those scenarios going on right now.
But our employees are getting paid their full salary anyway.
They are, but then let's say you decide, I don't want to watch my grandchildren anymore. It's too risky. I really don't think they should be in my home. So they go back to the parents, and now the parents don't have childcare. Now that's, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, but the parents may not be employees of Lewiston Public Schools. So we
Correct.
don't owe them any,
No,
unfortunately, we don't owe them.
right.
Okay, that's a little confusing, I guess.
Mr. Majoris Collins, is it a clarifying question? Okay.
I have plenty to say that's not, but I wanted to take a crack at what Mr. Damon had just asked, which was, if I'm understanding this correctly, even though our employees are at home, or mostly at home, mostly entirely being paid their full salaries, they're also expected to be available for a Zoom meeting, or to respond to something, or to be communicating with learners, or any number of other work-related activities. And so if what I'm understanding is correct, the way that the scenario that Ms. Avery just described would come into play would be, you're a teacher, your parents are watching your kids, the parents won't watch the kids anymore, so now you have to watch the kids. So then you would be able to say under this language, I'm no longer available to take a Zoom meeting today. I'm no longer available to do the things that we're expecting our employees to do today because I don't have childcare because of COVID-19. Is that basically
Yes.
how this relates to it?
You did a much better job than I did. Thank you.
Nailed it. Okay. So Ms. Parks, you're up. Discussion, comments?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Damon?
We're voting to accept this proposal as that Bobby's laid out.
It's a first read, so we're
First
giving our discussion on it, any changes that we would want to see. And then she would come back with a second read. We would vote for the first read. We would have to have a motion for it to go any further.
Okay, I'm okay with it.
Okay. So I think the only issue that I have really is the any illness piece of that. The ready and willing to work is my understanding, and I think that makes sense. So, I mean, there's a lot of complications. There are people who were on maternity leave before this happened and they can't come back. So I understand that we're preventing them from coming back to work, and they would be at risk if they're still pregnant, those kinds of things. But to say, well, I'm just feeling under the weather today, and so I'm not going to join in any Zoom meetings, I'm not giving any instruction. That to me is going a little bit further than what I'm comfortable with, which I'm comfortable with pretty much everything else. So that would be my concern, is that we're saying carte blanche, no matter what. I mean, how does that affect vacation? This is just illness, you're saying, but there could be people that say, I'm tired from this, I need a mental health day. Does that count? We have leave time. We don't have sick time necessarily with the collective bargaining agreements for some. So it gets a little dicey there. Mr. Majoris Collins.
I think the proposal as it stands is excellent. I think it's doing right by our employees. I have absolute confidence and faith in the folks who work for Lewiston Public Schools and the fact that they choose to work in the jobs that they have. They choose to put students first every single day. This does not seem in any way to be overly generous, but I think it's really the right thing to do, and I strongly support it exactly as is.
Ms. Whitlow?
I'm in agreement with you, Miss Roy. I don't like the word any as well. I would probably vote against it if it stayed in. I do have a concern, or I guess more of a question for Miss Avery about the stipend positions. Now, do we know if all of the stipend positions that were approved for the spring, have those specific people already been working it? Everybody and deserving of that stipend?
So I'm referencing only athletics at the high school. So not district-wide, just the high school. Yes, I have verified that they actually have been planning and prepping. Yes.
So if we could possibly change the wording to athletics at the high school, not all co-curricular, that'd be great.
Okay.
Ms. Hawkins.
I'm not putting the video on because I have a cat on my face. I'm trying to speak around, so bear with me.
We love cats. Come on now.
I very much like the proposal as it is. I understand people's possible concern with the any illness, but having this even be available is how we're going to keep our instructors, our stipend people, all of the people that we need when we get school back up again. I am currently unemployed and waiting to hear if I'm even going to get unemployment. My income is 0. Knowing that I applied for a stipend, I was approved, this is what's going to be happening, could keep us from losing possible assets. Just keep that in mind. I like the proposal very much as it is. I like the amount of leeway in it. And I think if we do have a concern person by person on how they're using that leeway, we do have the ability to address it. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Potvin?
So I get 3 items. One, first, I totally agree with you, Monique, and your concerns on that any piece. I think that opens it up. That being said, I kind of like to see us go in a direction. This, just from my own experience, what I've been seeing with neighbors, with coworkers, I just don't think the shock of all of this is sat in yet. And I think when people do experience something, whether it's through their family or themselves, the last thing they need to do is have to figure out, is there a pool available so I can get sick time? I would like the people to be guaranteed that, you know, if they do indeed have something that's related to what's going on, that they'd be taken care of. And they shouldn't have to struggle to find whatever leave they're going to have. The third part is I've reached for my Rolaids. I'm still having a lot of heartburn about the stipends. Bobby, just one more clarification. If we did not go back to school in May and let's just say nothing's happening after that, would we still be obliged to have to pay the stipends for the remainder of the year?
So we have to pay the stipend. So, and I should be very specific. For co-curricular and extracurricular, that where advisors or coaches have begun the planning process or the prepping process, whether it's athletics or whether it's activities, clubs, they do need to be paid for those stipends. So for the portion in which they've worked, if we go back in May, I think your question is, are we obliged to pay that? I'm assuming that those sports and activities are going to pick up. They're going to actually be held. And so therefore, yes, we would be obliged to pay those.
No, I meant the other way. If we don't go back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. You know, it's subject to bargaining. It's in there. It's in the collective bargaining agreement. My idea is that if we're not holding them, if we're not doing the work, then no, I wouldn't think that we would be obliged to pay that. But I do know that folks have started that process. So I think that for those that have, they should be paid.
Yeah, I mean, if they're working, I'm all set with that. It's the continuation or worsening of the event. And again, I look at extracurricular activities as just that, extra. So I guess I just can't support with that in mind. So I'm good.
Mr. Donovan?
I would just echo the concern around the all illnesses, and that is all I have. If we could get clarification around that, that's all I have personally. I support the rest of it.
Ms. Ray?
Thank you. One clarifying question. Are we asking employees to report this time in a particular way or follow any process for tracking this time, even if we are not taking it from their leave balances?
So if I understand your question, are you talking about now currently, or are you talking about when we go back into session?
During the now times.
Well, we haven't been charging it. So for food service, yes, we're tracking that because they're working their regular hours. So yes, they've been putting their leave time on their timesheet but not for anybody else.
Okay, so there would be no way to understand building by building or position by position how people are using their leave time right now.
That's right. Outside of nutrition, that's correct.
Okay. I think one thing that might just be helpful is understanding how this leave time is being used and what the particular scenarios are right now. We can only talk in hypotheticals at this moment, but understanding the need or the questions that are coming up is helpful. So that was helpful to hear a few of those. In terms of the any illness, I am okay with that in there. There's not universal testing happening. So how could we specify during this time what type of illness someone is under? The other complicating factor is, I mean, I had a different health issue last week and I spent 5 hours on the phone with the teledoc just on the waiting queue. So, you know, I of course had it on speakerphone and was trying to conduct work as well, but I took more time away from work than I would have normally to resolve that illness and then make arrangements to go to the pharmacy in these very unique times. And so I think we just need to give some grace there personally, and it's my hope that the rest of the committee will feel that way.
Superintendent Finn, I just want to give you a chance before I ask members if they have any other things to say. Do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think it's fantastic conversation. I'm glad that we have a couple of reads on this. I think everyone's raised some phenomenal points, a lot to think about, but I appreciate the conversation.
Ms. Paquette, yeah, I see you.
I just wanted to add to the stipend conversation. At the elementary level, the majority of those stipends are paid to teachers to facilitate work with other teachers. So it's not necessarily, there are some that do extracurricular activities, you know, with students, but many of the stipends at the elementary level are for teachers to provide some, you know, be a facilitator of a group of teachers and so on and so forth. And that work is still happening as we move into our professional development with teachers. We've tapped some of those people who are getting a stipend for that very reason, because we know that they are stipended for that work. So for example, we have SEL facilitators at each of our schools, and they have been working with Aisha, our SEL coordinator, to put some things together as well. So I just wanted to give that as an example. So we had something else to wrap our head around rather than just work with students.
Well, I think it's important that you said it, because that's the kind of stipends I think of. And that's why I think Ms. Whitlow was saying, can you be specific about what you're talking about with stipends? Because academic stipends and like leadership stipends and all those that were running through my head, I would imagine that work is still happening for those folks. It's the people who everything just got put on pause. And so maybe they are doing some virtual coaching, but that's going to end whatever, April 30th. And they say school's done for the rest of the year and there's no sports happening. Like, where do we balance that out? So I think that if we do put this forward, that we have to be specific about what stipends we're talking about, because there are a ton. Anybody in negotiations knows how long the list of stipends really are. And, you know, somebody could argue, well, you didn't identify which stipend you were talking about, so I should get mine. So I think that sounds like a lot of detail, but I think it's necessary detail so that people know what's expected and they can plan on it. Okay, lightning round. Raise your hand if you have, and I'll try to go in order of award. So Ms. Parks, then Mr. Damon, and then, okay, we'll just go around one more time. Ms. Parks?
I have a follow-up question on something that Bobby said. Are there any food service or any hourly workers at all who have already been using some of their leave time, or has everybody been paid in full to date?
Nope, food service, they are using their leave time. We are charging them their leave time.
So if we pass this current discussion, will they be reimbursed for their leave time?
If this passes, then I would highly recommend we do that, yes.
I don't understand why you would be charging them and no one else.
It just fell into place. They're the ones that are working every day. They're working their normal schedule. Everybody else is really not. Even our facilities crew was on a skeleton crew at this point. So food service, they're doing their job. They're showing up, working their contracted hours.
It seems like we'd give them more protection then. I don't know, that's
Yes.
bizarre. That's bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Either you do it for everybody or no one kind of thing. So that makes me uneasy.
Yeah, so, and we've talked a lot, we've gone a lot around and around on this, and we recognized that, you know, we're keeping track, but we can always give them back if this committee decides to move in that direction.
Mr. Damon?
Just to clarify about the stipends, Bobby had said she was isolating that to spring sports, but now we've come around full circle. So that was what we put out there for the viewing public. And now we've just changed that.
I don't think we have language to say what it is. Bobby was writing down what she meant, and she meant spring sports. Is that correct, Miss Avery?
That's correct.
That's what this document says now. So if you have reservations about just identifying those things that she was talking about, and that would have to be an amendment we wouldn't vote for it as it is written because we are adding and subtracting here. So Miss Avery?
The language specifically states, I'll just read it one more time, all stipends for co-curricular and athletics will be honored for the 2020 spring season. So it's not just sports. In this proposal, it's all activities. So co-curricular and, so like Monique was talking about how there's this great big long list of stipends, and she's right. It would be all of those that fall within the spring season. If you're looking at something more expanded, then yeah. I'll need to.
You said high school, right?
What I said was I've authorized payment to LHS athletics because they're known. I know that they've actually been prepping and planning. So they've done the work. They've done a lot of their work. They haven't done the actual coaching piece, but they have prepped and planned. And so we are obligated to pay them for the work that they have done. Those are the ones that I know about that have been approached to me. If there's any other, let's say, and I'm just using the high school as an example. I mean, it could be at the middle school too. Any co-curricular, that's why in this language, I included co-curricular. So if there's any co-curricular activities going on that they can provide evidence that they've been prepping and planning, then yes, we should be paying them because they've done that work.
So the chess club would count or something like that? as an example?
If yes, if they've prepped and planned. If they haven't done that, if they've done nothing, then no.
Who's making that determination?
So what we would do in HR and payroll is we would talk with the building administrator. We would obviously talk with a coach or advisor. You know, I'm sure that we could ask for notes and whatnot. I think that I really think that the building administrator would be the one signing off on whether or not they've prepped and planned.
Mr. Damon,
I
go
think
ahead.
we need some more, I guess we'll need some more clarification on that.
Okay. I would agree. There's language around that I think would help us decide. And then I already said my other things. So Mr. Majerus Collins, you have other things?
Yeah, I guess I have two things. My opinion is this document started with a really laudable proposition that no Lewiston Public Schools employee should take a financial hit as a result of this shutdown. And I think that that's the standard that we should stick to. I think that no one should lose earnings as a result of this. On a procedural side, it's clear that the committee has splits on some of the particular questions that have been brought up. What I'm hoping is that we can have a clear process for the committee deciding which way we want to go on each one of those things, rather than just coming back here at the next meeting and hearing that this has been determined in some way. I think that these are important policy questions that the committee should decide.
So, and Ms. Ray can help me here, but I believe that for a first read, you'd have to have a motion to support it as is, or a motion to support it with some amendments, and then a second on that, and then a majority vote to move it forward as amended or as is. So that's my understanding of that process of how we would go to the next step with it. Ms. Ray,
I would agree with that. I think given the format that we are find ourselves in, it might be prudent to maybe take a thumbs up and middle thumb and thumbs down on the two sticking points that we're hearing on stipends and any illness, to give Ms. Avery some guidance on how to move forward with the second reading, because the goal is to push policy forward and not just to confuse her.
no, yeah, the language in the guidance on that is definitely important. It doesn't mean we wouldn't support something, but it may be the difference between a couple of words. And so I think you're right, this is a little bit different, but then again, it is, you know, this committee can come up with enough motions to get to the point where you have something that can move forward. So rather than a consensus, I'd prefer to do motions because that's a formal procedure that goes with a first read to move it forward. Ms. Parks, you had something, is that relevant to what I'm saying, or? Yes, okay, go ahead.
I think it is. I'm fine one way or another if with the word any or taking the word any out. I think when it comes to the stipends, we shouldn't be picking and choosing who we're going to keep whole. People have already planned their budgets based upon money that they were anticipating. And I think to go back on that now would be really wrong. Regardless of what's happening. I know that there's probably some people who get a stipend that are doing a little bit more work, like yearbook. I'm sure the high school yearbook person is doing a lot of work right now trying to pull a yearbook together, but that doesn't mean that somebody who's doing less work right now, when we've told the teachers, you're on standby, but there's not much for you to do. I think having an expectation that they be producing something when we're not really giving them anything to produce is too much. And they should, I think the stipends should stay as they are because people have already banked on having that money.
And those stipends have been budgeted out. I would point that out. And it's not their fault. So I'm going to get to you, Mr. Finn. I'm going to do one more loop around here. So I was at 3. Were you done, Mr. Majerus Collins?
This is so fun to use. Yes, I'm done for now.
Okay, Ms. Whitlow.
Yeah, I mean, coming from negotiations background, as a few of us are. That's why it's very hard for us just to say any and these words that and all, when we know that although we want to trust that everybody is doing what they should be doing and being honest about everything, that's not the world that we live in. And we need to, if we don't clarify, then at some point we then have to deal with it on the legal end or and those things. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that there's a reason for maybe we need to clarify a little bit better, because we've seen it. So, I guess the stipend issue, I think is good. I think everybody has made valid points of they've prepped, they've done the work. I guess we need to pay them for the work that they've done. And if we don't have any way to figure out how much work they've done in comparison to what they're supposed to be paid, there is no, I don't think that there is any type of clarification of how much of the stipend do you get paid for how much work. I don't think that's ever been clarified, and that would be a lot of work. So you either pay it all or you don't pay any, I guess, and not just for the work that they've done. So I'm okay with that, but I'm still not content with the other portion. I can't remember what it is now.
Any illness was
Any
what the,
illness there. Thank you so much. Okay, and that's all I have to say.
thank you. Okay, Linnea, you have anything to add? Anything different?
Not really. I agree with Ms. Parks. Budgets are a thing. I know mine is completely out the window right now, and that's a level of stress I don't want to deal with. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Poppin.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan?
I have nothing further.
Okay, and Ms. Ray?
I just wanted to clarify with Ms. Avery, has this gone through legal or any of the collective bargaining units leadership?
I've had
And does
one
it have to, I guess is the second question.
I've had one conversation with Dan Stockford on this. His point was about timing and how long this would be in effect. But this was way before the statute actually was approved, before the bill was approved. So it's now approved. And so now we have the law. My recommendation is that once I get direction from you, this would go to Dan to make sure that he's good with it, and then bring it back for the second read.
Okay, Madam Chair, would it be appropriate to make a motion right now?
Mr. Finn wanted to say something before we do
sorry.
that.
Great.
I
I will
totally ignored
wait.
him for 5
Sorry.
minutes or 10 minutes. I don't know. Go ahead, Mr. Finn.
Thank you for that. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot to take in, and everyone's got some very fascinating points. And my role in these meetings is to just provide advice from an educator standpoint. So I will say this is that if you look at over the years, what our coaches, whether they be academic coaches or athletic coaches, what they make with a stipend as opposed to the work they actually do. I'll say from experience, they probably make about $2 an hour. That's about right. And if you're worth your salt, you're probably working for about $2 an hour. And I think that we've proven to have very, very competitive, not only athletics, but also co-curricular activities as well. And so I want to speak from an educator standpoint and take myself out of the superintendent's role and put myself back into a teacher's role, because it wasn't too long ago that I was doing that. That $3,500 stipend, that's books for your kid. That's a potential, down payment on someone's housing. If your kid's going off to college, it might be that new piece of furniture that you're looking to get, and you counted on that. And we made a commitment to you, and you made a commitment to us. And around March 7th, March 8th, people were still counting on that. But then March 16th came, and everyone's world just turned upside down. What really sticks with me is what Ms. Roy said. She said, listen, this is already budgeted for. We've made a commitment to these folks. And I'll tell you what, because I've done their job before, and I can really appreciate where they're coming from. They're going to come back tenfold strong when they do come back. They're going to really appreciate us keeping them whole when you didn't have to do that, but they're going to really appreciate that. I'm looking at things now as I'm projecting out, and I'm looking at how this committee has agreed to treat our teachers and our staff and our coaches now. This is an investment, in my opinion. It's an investment to keep folks with us and keep them with us for a long, long time. I kind of feel like our teachers and coaches are interviewing us right now. And I think we've come through for them, and I think we'll continue to come through for them. But I want to just applaud the entire discussion this evening. But I think also we probably should keep in mind the reality of it is that for the hours that these folks have put in over the years, we get these folks pennies on the dollar because they just love the kids and they love what they do. I would expect that in some way, shape, or form, those relationships are still being kept, and that when the day comes where they say play ball, and our folks play ball again, they'll give us that nod because we were looking out for them as well. Just from a human perspective, and from an educator perspective, that's kind of the advice that I would give. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I think that from a retention standpoint, negotiations always in mind, that is a good retention strategy to make sure that people know that, again, not your fault, going to take care of you, hope you come back next season kind of mentality is one to keep in mind. Okie dokie. So there was somebody who wanted to put a motion.
I would love to do that.
Okay, Ms. Ray.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as is with the addition of defining under employee compensation part 6 when the last month started.
Second.
But can I make sure Mr. Finn got that down? You did, okay. And who seconded? Ms. Parks seconded the motion. So just for clarification, you would keep the any illness in there?
Yes, under that motion.
Okay. Discussion for that motion. Mr. Majerus Collins?
This is a clarifying question. After all the discussion of stipends, did we arrive at the fact that if we pass the motion as presented, that we will be making everyone whole on stipends now through the end of the semester? Is that correct?
My intention with my motion is to do that.
Ms. Parks, is that your intention by seconding it? Yes, she says yes. Okay.
Then I'm fully
Thank you for that. Other discussion? Ms. Whitlow?
I mean, I would really like to see some better wording than any illness. I don't know if there's any way we can put something else in there or just related to COVID-19.
So I'm with you on that. Like, in order to have this go forward as is, they'd have to have all the votes, and you could make a motion to have Ms. Ray's, the way that Ms. Ray wanted it with the amendment, and that could be voted on if you did not want to vote on it as is with that language.
So I would like to.
But I would prefer to vote as on the motion that's on the floor rather than do all that stuff where we jump over each other's motion, just to make it clear, if you don't mind. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion on the floor?
There was a point of order from Mr. Majerus Collins.
I'm sorry, yes?
Yeah, I just this is either for the parliamentarian or for the chair. This motion requires a majority support or unanimous support?
Majority to 5.
Okay.
Ms. Ray, am I right?
It does require a majority. If a member would like to propose an amendment, we would take that as a matter of priority and vote on that for inclusion if it was not accepted as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
So I would go ahead and amend that. Is that?
Miss Ray, can you clarify your statement, please?
Yep. So if Ms. Whitlow's intention is to propose an amendment that would remove any illness to change it to illness related to COVID-19, she would say, I would like to make a motion to amend to include that phrase. She would need a second on that motion. And then that would be what we were discussing and voting on.
So you wouldn't have to say yes to that?
Correct. I would just, based on my personal feelings, vote yes or no on the amendment. I believe it's clear that I would vote no.
Up to you, Miss Whitlow.
So I would like to move to amend the proposal, and is that not the right word?
You're
To
good.
eliminate all or any illness and clarify it to be specific to the COVID-19 and the rest of how it's written.
And I would second that. Mr. Potvin? Oh, okay. So now the vote, Alicia, is on,
Now the discussion is on the amendment.
the discussion is
then
on the amendment. And then the
When
vote,
discussion is finished, the vote will be on the amendment. Yes.
Mr. Potvin, you were going to second that. Did you have anything to add for the discussion part of this?
You know what? I'll keep it simple. No, I'll pass.
Okay. Mr. Majoris Collins, are you raising your hand?
Yes.
Okay.
This is in the discussion on the amendment. I just want to echo what Councilor Ray had said earlier with regard to the difficulty of getting tests for COVID-19 and the difficulty people are facing right now navigating the healthcare system. That I think that is something that every member should keep in mind as they vote on this amendment.
And I would keep in mind the example that Miss Avery used, which was a heart attack, or, you know, if it were something else, their sciatica was acting up, or, you know, in my opinion, so here's where I'm basing my decision on this. The food service workers are going to get burned out. They're the only ones that are working. In another district that I am familiar with, they are asking ed techs to step up to the plate to help them out, to rotate through and give them a break. So because we could call them and say, are you ready and willing and able to work? And they say, no, you know, my back is aching, I don't want to hand out food. That would be a sick day. If they say, I have something related to COVID-19, I have to take care of my kids, that's fine. I understand that tracking that, and these are discussions we have in negotiations all the time about leave and not leave. I believe people are going to tell the truth. I believe people are going to say, I'm going to take a sick day on this one because I can't step up to the plate and I'm really sorry about that. So for me, it is about people using integrity. I think that they will. I think that they'll say, I'm going to use a sick day for this because it doesn't have anything to do with COVID-19. And I want to honor the fact that people are having a hard time and they have to use the COVID-19 thing is actually affecting them. I think they can make that distinction. So that's my justification or why I'm pushing for this part of it. Miss Avery?
So I appreciate this conversation. I wanted to point out, and somebody brought it up, but for those of us that feel like we may have COVID-19 and we want to be tested, and we're told that we can't be tested, but yet we still have, let's say, a fever and we still have some symptoms. If we change the language to state that, change it from all to only COVID-19 folks, it's going to be really hard for us to interpret whether or not, because we're not in the medical profession, right? So whether or not they actually have COVID-19 or do they have just the flu, you know, the standard flu. I don't know how we're going to make that determination.
Ms. Ray?
I will make myself sacrificial for this. As someone with severe asthma and allergies, I honestly could not tell you right now if my current wheezing and coughing is due to COVID-19 related illness or pre-existing conditions. And so I'm uncomfortable and I would love to just keep sleeping because I'm not getting enough oxygen either way. And so how would I determine that through this? I think just in all fairness, we are in unprecedented time, and I know folks are relying on past experience with negotiations. And I just think this is not the time to be that specific for me.
I think Ms. Parks and then Ms. Whitlow.
I have a question that's in addition to what we're saying now. My motivation is, especially knowing that the food service workers are using leave time and experiencing loss because of this already. They're some of our hardest workers and they're some of our lowest paid workers. So I'm really kind of focusing on them. I think that getting this approved and up and running as quick as possible should be our motivation. So I understand wanting to work out all of the details, but I also think that not editing it too much so that we can get it approved would be ideal. And I would also, this may be a question for Ms. Ray, but I would like to know what we need to do to get this approved tonight and then waive the second reading so that we can get this in place today, hopefully.
It's not, it wouldn't be, oh, never mind. Go ahead, Ms. Ray. She asked you the question.
There is a way to suspend the rules and take the second reading tonight. Sounds like that is not the chair's preference, but again, that would be up to the deliberative body.
I'm not comfortable until legal looks at it. That's all I'm saying. No matter which way we go, and we can put this on, like I said, there are times we can call a meeting if we need to get something done. I have no problem, as you know, I've been calling meetings, but I don't feel comfortable without legal. Taking a look at it one more time now that it's later than when Bobby first consulted. That's my biggest concern with jumping ahead.
To clarify, the discussion should remain on the amendment. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So I only had a first and second on this. Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect a little bit back on what Ms. Ray had mentioned about she wouldn't know if she's got, allergies or COVID. But there in the wording there, it does say that if you are self-isolating or quarantining, that justifies, and I would assume that would be many of us. I am. I know that for myself. I had bronchitis pneumonia my whole life, nonstop. I'm not going out, so I would be covered by that. But if someone literally says, I had a heart attack and that's why I'm not coming in, well, that's not related to COVID-19. That is something specific other. And why wouldn't they use, if they can't come to work to help out, why wouldn't we have them use their sick time? I guess that's just where I'm looking at it.
Okay, Mr. Majoris Collins, and then we're going to wrap this up.
Okay. I would say that the example of a heart attack has been cited a couple of times by multiple members, and I'm not a doctor. I could be wrong, but that would strike me as an obvious candidate for putting someone into a high-risk category for COVID-19. Virtually any illness that someone has is going to put them into a high-risk category, and I am hopeful that the committee will not place undue restrictions on our employees during this particularly uncertain and scary time.
That makes good sense to me. Ms. Whitlow? Yeah. So if that was a friendly ask for an amendment, but if we wanted to go back to the original motion, could we do that, Ms. Ray, or no? Do we have to vote?
It was not accepted as a friendly amendment. It was made as a motion and a second, and now has to be voted unless the member from Ward 4 wants to withdraw it.
I can withdraw that.
Okay.
Same.
And who seconded it?
See?
Okay. Then
Uh,
we are
so-
considering the original motion.
Now we'd be considering the original motion, and thank you all for a really, really great discussion and fleshing that out
And
and understanding everybody's points of view. It's important to do.
just
Okay.
for Mr. Finn as the secretary, he will have to note the withdrawal as well. Yeah.
Okay, so voting on the motion originally for a first read to go to a second read. All those in favor, we're going to do a roll call. No? Yes. Right?
Roll call.
Yeah.
Roll.
You can say yes or no during the roll call. All right. So, Ms. Parks. Yeah.
Are you waiting on me?
Yes, ma'am. We're voting.
Sorry, something's going on with, my children are taking the internet from me, so everything is stuttering. I apologize. Yes, I support it.
Okay. Mr. Damon.
No.
That's me, right?
Mhm.
Yes. 3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6, Mr. Pavin,
No.
7,
Yes.
and Miss Ray.
Yes.
So it'll go to a second read. We'll get that on the agenda as soon as possible. The understanding that council will look at this, Bobby? Yeah. I just want to make sure we're all legal.
Ms. Roy, can I just ask that we say what the vote was and who the nay votes were, just for the record?
So is Mr. Finn, go ahead.
Yes, for the record, we had a 7-2 vote, 7 with the yay, and with the no being member Damon and member Potvin.
Thank you. I just remember Ms. Turgeon asking us to do that.
Oh, that's right. She has to watch the video and write this all down for the notes. Miss Whitlow?
Yeah, I just want to say that I don't typically sway my votes there the way I did, but I do want to say that Mr. Majoris can't, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Collins, you had a really valid point, and I, when you've got rational people speaking rationally, it's nice, and we can all come together and figure it all out. And so, thank you.
All right. Well, that was a long agenda item, but it was necessary. Okay, I got to find my agenda again. Sorry. Stand by. Okay, agenda item number 6, to receive and approve the first reading of the 2020-2021 Lewiston Public Schools Personnel Policy. And I think that's going to be Miss Avery or Miss Gilbert. I'm looking for my rationale.
We're going to bring Miss Gilbert in.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
So you'll notice that throughout this document, improvements have been made to grammar. Dates have been changed to reflect fiscal year 21. And we've also added some changes to note current standard business practice. So the first change is on section 7, holidays, page 4. We're changing Washington's birthday to President's Day and Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And this is to align with language in Title 20A. The next change is on Appendix A, page 13. We are changing 226 MRSA to Title 26, Chapter 9A. And again, that's to correct the reference in the law. The next change is Appendix A, page 14. We're deleting number 7 because that law has been repealed. Moving on to Appendix B, page 15, we're adding sentence to number 8, stating that a substitute working in a long-term assignment would not be eligible for the $100 bonus. This was an unwritten standard business practice, and we wanted to put it in writing. Appendix B, page 16, we're adding lunch monitors to the scale. This group has not been listed in any other salary scale in any bargaining unit, so we are including it here. Appendix B, page 16, we're updating the food service personnel salary scales for a 3% increase, and this would be consistent with other bargaining agreements within the district. Moving on to Appendix C, page 17, we are updating the adult education salary scale again for a 3% increase, again to be consistent with other bargaining units. Moving on to Appendix D, page 18, we are inserting a new position at the SMN4 level, the lead school-based secretary special education. This position was special education secretary within the general government contract, but was functioning as a lead secretary. The position was created within the special ed department and approved by Superintendent Finn in October 2019, and it just needed to be added to the personnel policies. Same page, we are regrading the facilities and payroll supervisor positions from SMN 7 to SMN 9, and this will align them with the other supervisory positions within the personnel policies. Same page, we are changing the title of Nutrition Operations Specialist to Assistant Director of Food Service. And final item on Appendix D, page 19, we are updating the salary schedule for a 3% increase, again, to be consistent with other bargaining agreements. Moving on to Appendix E, page 20, we are regrading the ELL intake and assessment coordinator position from SME 15 to SME 9. This actually was a regrade that was completed and approved by the superintendent in August of 2018. The job description was updated and the position no longer required teacher certification. This was an oversight in last year's personnel policy, so we are adding it this year. Appendix D, page 20, regrading the district homeless liaison from SME 11 to SME 13. This was a teaching position that was transitioned to a year-long position overseeing K through 12. It was actually completed in March 2019, and it was incorrectly placed on the classification salary scale, so we are adjusting that to correct that error. Appendix E1, page 20, we are inserting a new position at SME 15, the day treatment clinical supervisor. This was a new position that was created during the 2019 budget season. The job description was created and hiring completed after the 1920 budget was approved. Again, Appendix E, page 20, we are inserting a new position at SME 16, Social Emotional Learning and Equity Resources Coordinator position. This was a new position that was created during the current budget and approved by the school committee in November of 2019. Inserting a new position at SME 17, the Continuous School Improvement Coordinator position. Again, this was a new position that was created within this current year budget and approved in August of 2019. Appendix E, page 22, we are removing Assistant Superintendent from the title of Chief Administrative Officer. There's a note with respect to the assistant superintendent title, so that is no longer required within the chief administrative officer title. And then finally, Appendix E, page 23, we are updating the salary scale for a 3% increase, again, to be consistent with other bargaining agreements.
Oh, Miss Avery, before I start with committee members.
Yes, Monique, could you go back to the facilities director position? I think, unless I misheard, I think we skipped over that one. To make sure we're clear.
Yes, Appendix E, page 20, we're regrading the facilities director position from SME 16 to SME 18. And this is to align with the other director positions within the personnel policies. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to start. I'll just go in order again. It's just easier than me to try to keep track of hands going up. So Ms. Parks, questions, comments? You're good? Okay. I have the, oh wait, no, sorry. Mr. Damon comes before me. Mr. Damon?
Yeah, I don't really have any questions about it. I reviewed it. Seems, I mean, it is what it is.
Okay, so then it is my turn, and I do have a question. Damn it. I'm trying to understand, I understand why you would reclassify the facilities person to match the others, but if we're looking at 15 through SME 15 through 17 on page 20, you've got supervisors mixed with coordinators, and directors. So can somebody talk me through why these classifications don't, other ones are being aligned appropriately, yet these don't, their titles don't always match. 15 seems okay, but then there's the day treatment clinical supervisor who's in with all these coordinators, and then you've got a coordinator in the 16 who's in with supervisors. Can you just explain that a little bit, please? Either Miss Gilbert or Miss Avery.
So I don't know if I can explain it. I can tell you that we're working because we inherited this. So I don't know what the logic was back in the day. I can tell you that we're working hard to review job descriptions, to have discussions about a lot of these positions and then reclassify them. And we do a little bit of that each year. And that's what you're seeing here this year. And I think actually this is probably more than what we typically do to reclassify to get positions in the right place. I would agree that there's probably more work that needs to be done with this. We want to be very careful about how many we do based on the budget, making sure
Right.
that it's adequately budgeted for. I can tell you that these requests are all in the FY21 budget.
Mhm.
So we don't have to worry there. I would just be careful as to how many we do each year.
That makes sense. I think though, and this came up during the hiring of the coordinator for the continuous improvement, like jumping that high on the scale or in that classification for a coordinator with supervisors and directors. So I think rather than going back and trying to fix it later, we have to really start considering where people land when they start. When we're saying, here's the job description, and they're going to be a coordinator, then they would fall in. I know this came up during that discussion, but I think we really do need to figure out ahead of time when we're posting jobs what that title would be to match where that classification is. That's my only thing. Miss Whitlow.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't know, are we going around and voting on this now or making a motion to approve it? I can.
I'm going around for everybody to have a comment first. So
I'm
then,
good then.
okay. Then Ward 5, you're up.
Sorry, too many mice.
Oh, wait, Kieran, I skipped you. I skipped Ward 3. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I got more than my fair share of time tonight. It seems fine to me.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Ms. Hawkins.
They're all good. Looks good to me.
Sorry. I'm losing my battery. I had to plug in. Okay. Mr. Potvin.
Yeah, I just have one question. I don't know who Miss Gilbert is. Can I be reminded who she is for the public to know too?
Oh my gosh, you don't know her?
No.
Go ahead,
She's a-
Monique. It's another Monique. Monique, introduce yourself. What do you do here?
Monique Gilbert, HR Director for Lewiston Public Schools.
You're the HR. Okay. All right.
Oh, you're the HR.
Now I'm good. I'm fine with the presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan.
Everything looked great. Thank you for introducing yourself, Mrs. Gilbert. Everything looked great. Thank you very much.
And Miss Ray?
I do have questions. Sorry. Under Appendix B, with this food service categories, I was just curious, and I just did a quick Google search and couldn't find anything, so that's where this is coming from. What will Maine's minimum wage be going into calendar year 2021?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What will Maine's minimum wage be going into calendar year 2021?
It's $12 per hour.
So this personnel policy would not get us to that $12 per hour. Is that correct?
Let me see. We'll have to change that.
And I would have been supportive of the 3% increase. I just want to make sure we're complying with that state law and its important implications.
Which page is that one on, Alicia?
It was Appendix B. Let me jump back.
Page 15. Right.
I think that sounds right.
That's right. So that needs to be changed to $12 per hour. Thank you.
Yep. And then my second question was for Miss Avery. And correct me if I'm wrong, because there's a lot floating around my head right now. But Appendix D, one of the recategorizations was the payroll supervisor. And that's something that I believe came before the school committee for a vote. Is that correct? Okay. She's nodding in the affirmative.
Yes.
For this. Okay. I am trying to understand what needs to come before us and what does not, as a result of reflecting back on that conversation. Also thinking about, we as a school committee supported, let me scroll back, the continuous school improvement coordinator position, the social emotional learning position, but I do not remember speaking about some of the other positions on here. Some of these dates are way back, but it also sounds like the superintendent might have discretion. And I just want, if you're able to understand what goes which direction.
Yeah. Yes. So traditionally, whenever we move a position from a grade, it always, in the personnel policy, it always comes before the school committee so that you know that we're recommending moving it, because when you move it, it usually requires money. So if it's just a title change, then like we do have one in here that's a title change without any additional money attached to it at all. It's just a title change. We're actually, and we're telling you that these are actually, we're asking to move them and increasing pay grades.
Okay.
So that would come before the school committee.
As part of approving the personnel policy.
That's correct.
Okay, that's helpful context to have. Otherwise, it looks good. Thank you.
Superintendent Finn or Ms. Paquette, anybody have anything to add?
Just a couple things. First of all, I'm glad Monique Gilbert was able to introduce herself. She is the best in the business. We have a lot of those going on Louis Public Schools, and she's absolutely fantastic. I appreciate again the conversation around this, and appreciate all the work that Bobby and Monique put into personnel policy. Thank you.
Okay. So anybody, we can approve the first reading if there is a motion to do so.
Madam Chair,
Mhm.
I would like to make a motion to approve the first reading of the personnel policies for years 2020 to 2021.
Okay.
Second.
Second by Mr. Majerus Collins. Now we go roll call. Ms. Parks,
Good, thank you, yes.
Mr. Damon,
Yes.
myself, yes. Mr. Majerus Collins,
Yes.
Ms. Whitlow,
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mr. Potvin,
Yes.
Mr. Donovan,
Yes.
Ms. Ray.
Yes.
That was unanimous. Thank you all. Well, that's the only thing that's on our agenda.
Madam Chair, can I make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Absolutely can. Who seconded? Mr. Donovan? Ooh, you got one in there. All right. You're on the record. Okay. Ms. Parks? Mr. Damon? You want to adjourn? Yes. We're doing a thumbs up. Mr. Majerus Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yes.
Oh, yes, and me, yes. Miss Hawkins?
Yuppers.
Mr. Potvin?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ms. Ray?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
And everyone.
I'll be in touch. Goodbye.